Hey everyone, tonight we venture into the darkest corners of the galaxy, where ancient Sith knowledge lies buried beneath millennia of silence and shadow. The forgotten secrets of an empire so vast and terrible that even the Emperor himself trembled at their whispered names. Tonight we uncover the lost wisdom of the true Sith, those who transcended death itself and became something far more terrifying than any Jedi could imagine. So before we begin this journey into the unknown regions, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into galactic mysteries. And here's something that might surprise you. Over 90% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. If these stories help you drift off to sleep or fuel your passion for Star Wars lore, hitting that subscribe button really helps me continue creating these epic journeys for you. Also, if you're captivated by tales from other legendary universes like Game of Thrones, then you'll want to visit my new channel, The Raven's Tales. I've added the link in the description below, where we explore the deepest mysteries of Westeros and beyond. I'm genuinely curious to know where you're joining me from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop a comment and let me know. It's always incredible to see our community spanning from one end of the galaxy to the other, quite literally. Now settle in, dim those lights, get comfortable under your blanket, and let's journey together into the void between stars. Listen well, for this tale begins in the final moments of the greatest Sith Empire that ever existed, in a throne room carved from a single black crystal that stretched beyond the clouds of an unnamed world. The last Emperor of the True Sith stood before a device that hummed with the power of 1,000 dying stars. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of 10,000 years of accumulated darkness. "The ritual is complete," he whispered to the empty throne room, though his words somehow reached across the galaxy to every Force-sensitive being, causing them to wake in terror without knowing why. "We have become what the Jedi feared most. What even we ourselves never dared to imagine. The Force itself bends to our will now, not as servants, but as its new masters." But something had gone wrong. The Emperor's final transmission cut to static, and in that moment, an entire star system simply vanished from all records, as if it had never existed. No debris, no stellar remnants, just empty space where a thriving Sith stronghold had been moments before. The Jedi archives recorded it as a stellar collapse, but deep in the unknown regions, those who knew the truth understood that something far more terrifying had occurred. The true Sith had not died that day. They had become something else entirely, something that still watches from the spaces between stars, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what they believe is rightfully theirs. Tonight we follow the trail of their final secret, a mystery that will take us beyond the edge of known space and into the very heart of darkness itself. In the year 157 ABY, when the galaxy believed itself finally free from the ancient shadows of the Sith, you find yourself standing in the crystalline chambers of the Forgotten Archive, a repository of knowledge hidden within the hollow core of Korriban's secret moon. The chamber stretches impossibly high above you, its walls lined with thousands upon thousands of holocrons, each one pulsing with a faint crimson glow that casts dancing shadows across the polished obsidian floor. You are Dr. Cale Thorne, Imperial scholar and Xenar archaeologist, one of the last practitioners of a dying art. While others study the known history of the galaxy, you have dedicated your life to uncovering the mysteries that the official records dare not speak of. Your reputation for finding truth in the spaces between documented history has brought you to this moment, standing before the greatest collection of Sith knowledge ever assembled. The air here tastes of age and secrets, carrying with it the metallic tang of ancient power that makes your teeth ache. Every breath feels heavy, as if the very atmosphere has been saturated with the weight of forbidden knowledge accumulated over millennia. The silence is not empty but full, pregnant with whispers that exist just beyond the edge of hearing. Beside you stands Master Valeth Kren, a figure whose presence seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face, carved by decades of studying the darkest corners of galactic history, bears the marks of knowledge that no living being should possess. His eyes, once brown according to his Imperial records, now hold depths that seem to contain the void between stars. He has been your guide through the labyrinth of Sith history, and though his loyalty is unquestioned, there are moments when you catch him staring into the distance with an expression that suggests he sees things that are not there. The readings are stronger tonight. Master Valeth murmurs, his voice carrying the weight of exhaustion that comes from years of sleepless research. The confluence approaches, and the old powers stir in their hidden places. What we seek may finally reveal itself, but I fear the price of such revelation may be higher than either of us can imagine. The chamber around you defies conventional understanding of space and architecture. The walls curve impossibly, creating angles that hurt to look at directly. Holocrons float in precise formations, their arrangement following patterns that seem to shift when observed peripherally. Some contain the teachings of Sith Lords whose names have been erased from history, while others hold fragments of rituals so dangerous that even the most ambitious dark side practitioners refuse to complete them. At the center of the chamber stands the Nexus Console, a device of unknown origin that predates even the earliest Sith Empire. Its surface, smooth as polished bone, reflects not your image but shadows of possibilities, glimpses of what might have been or what might yet come to pass. Ancient Sith text spirals across its surface in languages that existed before the hyperlanes were mapped, before the Republic drew its first breath. Through the chamber's transparent walls, you can see the surface of Korriban far below, its red sand stretching endlessly toward horizons that shimmer with heat and malevolent energy. The Valley of the Dark Lords lies spread before you like a necropolis of titans, each tomb a monument to power that once shook the foundations of the galaxy. But even from this height, even through the filtered atmosphere of the archive, you can sense that something is wrong with the ancient burial ground. The tombs, which should radiate the dark side energy of their occupants, instead seem to pull at the force around them, creating voids where there should be presence. It is as if the very darkness that once defined this place has been consumed by something even hungrier, something that feeds on the shadows themselves. Master Valeth approaches one of the larger holocrons, its surface covered in inscriptions that seem to writhe and shift like living things. This one contains the final recordings of Lord Vitiate before his transformation, he explains, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But the knowledge it contains is incomplete, deliberately fragmented. Someone or something has been through the archives before us, removing specific pieces of information with surgical precision. The implications of his words settle over you like a shroud. If someone has been editing the historical record at this level, removing knowledge from the most secure repositories in the galaxy, then the scope of the conspiracy you are investigating extends far beyond anything you initially imagined. The question that haunts you now is not simply what happened to the True Sith Empire, but who has been working to ensure that their fate remains hidden. As you place your hand on the Nexus Console, the device responds to your touch with a vibration that resonates through your bones. The ancient text on its surface begins to glow more brightly, and for a moment you catch a glimpse of something that makes your blood run cold. A star map, showing not the current galaxy, but one where entire systems have been marked with symbols that your mind refuses to process, as if the very concept they represent is too alien for human comprehension. The journey you are about to undertake will take you beyond the edges of known space, into regions where the laws of physics bend to accommodate impossible realities. But first, you must unlock the secrets held within these walls, secrets that may very well determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The decision crystallizes in your mind as you stand before the Nexus Console, watching the ancient star map pulse with otherworldly light. The fragmented records, the surgically edited archives, the voids where tombs should radiate dark side energy, all point to a truth that cannot be ignored. Somewhere in the unknown regions, beyond the reach of Republic sensors and Imperial star charts, lies the answer to what became of the True Sith Empire. The Codex of Unmaking, as Master Valeth has named the collection of clues you have assembled, is not merely a historical curiosity, but a map to the greatest mystery in galactic history. "We cannot delay any longer," you declare, your voice echoing in the crystalline chamber. Every day we spend in debate is another day that the truth slips further from our grasp. The confluence Master Valeth spoke of is not some distant astronomical event. It is happening now. And if we are to uncover what the true Sith became, we must act while the cosmic alignments still favor revelation. Master Valeth nods slowly, his weathered face showing both resignation and anticipation. "I have spent 40 years preparing for this moment," he admits, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent in solitary research. "The archives have shown me fragments, glimpses of a transformation so complete that it defies every law of the Force we understand. But fragments are not enough. We need the complete picture, even if that picture reveals truths that will forever change how we perceive the nature of existence itself." The preparation for your journey into the unknown regions begins immediately. Unlike the exploratory missions of the past, this expedition requires equipment designed to function in areas where the Force itself behaves in unpredictable ways. Your ship, the Seeker's Lament, has been modified with shielding that can deflect not just physical threats but metaphysical ones. The hull bears inscriptions in Old Sith, protective wards that took Master Valeth months to perfect, each symbol carefully placed to create a barrier against influences that exist beyond the material realm. As you make final preparations in the Archive's docking bay, the first of the cosmic signs manifests. The red giant star that illuminates Korriban begins to pulse with a rhythm that matches no known stellar phenomenon. The light it casts takes on a deeper crimson hue, and for brief moments the shadows it creates seem to move independently of the objects that cast them. Master Valeth observes this with growing unease, consulting star charts that contain notations in languages that predate galactic civilization. "The eternal alignment," he whispers, tracing patterns in the air that correspond to stellar positions marked on his ancient maps. "It occurs once every 1,000 years, when the barriers between dimensions grow thin and the old powers can reach across the void. The true Sith knew of this phenomenon and built their greatest works to take advantage of it. If they still exist in any form, they will be strongest during these moments." The journey begins as you pilot the Seeker's Lament away from Korriban's hidden moon, leaving behind the familiar constellations of the galaxy's core worlds. The transition from known space to the unknown regions is not marked by any visible boundary, but you feel it in the Force itself. The background hum of countless billions of living beings gradually fades, replaced by something else entirely. Not silence, but a different kind of presence, ancient and patient and utterly alien to human understanding. Your first destination is the world of Nathema, though it no longer deserves to be called a world in any conventional sense. Emperor Vitiate's ritual of consumption drained it of all life, all Force energy, leaving behind a sphere of dead matter that orbits its star like a cosmic wound. As the Seeker's Lament enters the system, the ship's sensors begin registering impossible readings. The planet's mass is correct, its orbital mechanics unchanged, but according to every instrument designed to measure Force presence, Nathema simply does not exist. Landing on the surface proves to be an experience that challenges your understanding of reality itself. The ground beneath your feet feels solid enough, composed of the same minerals and stone that formed the planet's crust before Vitiate's ritual. But the air carries no scent. Your footsteps produce no echo, and the very act of breathing feels hollow, as if you are drawing nothing into your lungs, despite the atmosphere's apparent density. Master Valeth leads you through the ruins of what was once Nathema's greatest city, though the architecture defies easy description. Buildings that should have collapsed under their own weight remain standing, their impossible angles creating optical illusions that make navigation treacherous. Streets curve back on themselves, creating loops that seem to exist in more dimensions than the three your mind can process. Most disturbing of all are the shadows, which fall in directions that bear no relation to the position of the system's star. The ritual did more than drain life from this world, Master Valeth explains, as you examine the crystallized remains of what might once have been a fountain. It created a wound in reality itself, a place where the normal laws of existence no longer apply. But look closer at the evidence of destruction. The buildings are not ruined by time or neglect. They have been altered, transformed into something that serves a purpose we cannot yet comprehend. Your investigation of the city's central plaza reveals the first tangible clue to the True Sith Empire's fate. Buried beneath layers of crystallized matter lies a holocron unlike any you have encountered before. Its surface is not the traditional pyramid or cube of Sith design, but a complex geometric form that seems to shift and change as you observe it. When activated, it projects not the familiar image of a Sith Lord, but something that makes your vision blur and your mind recoil from direct observation. The voice that emerges from the holocron speaks in accented basic, though the accent belongs to no known human culture. The great work proceeds according to the eternal design. It intones, each word carrying harmonics that resonate in your bones. The transformation of flesh into will, of will into hunger, of hunger into dominion over the very foundations of existence. We who were Sith have become something greater, something that no longer requires the crude vessels of mortality to exercise power over the galaxy. The holocron's message continues, revealing fragments of a plan that spans millennia, references to the silence that will consume entire star systems, to the eternal throne that will allow its occupants to feed on the life force of every living being in the galaxy, to the becoming that will elevate the chosen few to a state of existence beyond death, beyond the force itself. But crucial details are missing, edited out with the same surgical precision you observed in the archives on Korriban. As you listen to the fragmented recording, the cosmic alignment intensifies. The star that illuminates Nathema begins to pulse more rapidly, and the shadows cast by the ruined city start to move with purpose. Master Valeth grabs your arm, his face pale with realization. "They know we are here," he whispers urgently. "The aligned stars have given them awareness of our presence. We must leave immediately before they decide to make direct contact." The return journey to the Seeker's Lament becomes a race against time as the very environment of Nathema begins to shift around you. Streets that were straight when you walked them now curve in impossible directions. Buildings that were empty now show signs of occupation, though the occupants remain just beyond the edge of perception. The air itself seems to thicken, making each breath an effort, as if the planet's wounded atmosphere is trying to prevent your departure. Aboard your ship, as Nathema shrinks behind you, you and Master Valeth examine the data you have gathered. The holocron's message, though incomplete, provides coordinates to 3 other locations scattered throughout the unknown regions. Each site is marked with symbols that correspond to different phases of the great work referenced in the recording. The first, identified as the Nexus of Whispers, is described as a place where the boundaries between thought and reality have been deliberately weakened. "We are not the first to follow this trail," Master Valeth observes, studying readings from the ship's sensors. "The energy signatures we detected on Nathema suggest that others have activated similar holocrons within the past standard year. Someone else is conducting the same investigation, following the same clues, seeking the same answers. The question is whether they are allies in our search for truth or servants of the very forces we seek to understand." The implications of this revelation weigh heavily on your mind as the Seeker's Lament navigates toward your next destination. If the True Sith Empire has indeed transformed into something beyond conventional understanding, then their influence may extend far beyond the unknown regions. the surgical editing of historical records, the precise removal of crucial information, the coordinated effort to obscure their true fate, all suggest an organization with resources and reach that spans the galaxy. As you prepare for hyperspace jump to the Nexus of Whispers, the ship's communication array picks up a signal that should not exist, a transmission from the coordinates you are approaching, broadcast on frequencies that were abandoned centuries ago. The message is brief, consisting of only a few words in High Sith, but Master Valeth's translation sends chills through your entire being. The children of the galaxy return to learn the price of knowledge. The transmission repeats endlessly, each repetition carrying subtle variations that suggest multiple voices speaking in unison. Come to us, scholars of the forgotten truths. Come and discover what we have prepared for those who would dare to uncover the secrets of the Eternal Throne. The transmission cuts off abruptly as your ship enters hyperspace, leaving behind the dead system of Nathema and carrying you toward whatever awaits at the Nexus of Whispers. But even in the swirling chaos of hyperspace, you can feel the weight of unseen eyes upon you, watching, evaluating, preparing for your arrival. The True Sith Empire may have vanished from galactic records, but they have not disappeared. They have simply evolved into something that operates beyond the boundaries of conventional existence, and now they know that their greatest secrets are being pursued by those who refuse to accept the official version of history. The stars blur past the viewport as the Seeker's lament carries you deeper into the unknown regions, toward revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the nature of power, the meaning of existence, and the true cost of transcending the limitations of mortality. The Nexus of Whispers reveals itself as your ship drops out of hyperspace, a sight that defies every expectation formed by decades of archaeological study. What should be a planetary system contains instead a massive construct of impossible architecture, a space station that stretches across distances normally reserved for moons. Its surface gleams with a metallic sheen that shifts color depending on the angle of observation, creating patterns that seem to writhe and pulse with organic life, despite the clearly artificial nature of the structure. Master Valeth studies the readings from the ship's sensors with growing amazement and concern. The energy output is beyond anything in our databases, he reports, his voice tight with barely controlled excitement. This construct is not merely powered by conventional means. It is drawing energy directly from the fabric of space itself, tapping into forces that exist at the quantum level of reality. The implications are staggering. As the Seeker's lament approaches the construct, you become aware of something that makes your skin crawl with unease. The structure is not silent, despite the vacuum of space that surrounds it. Through the Force, you can hear whispers, thousands upon thousands of voices speaking in languages that span the entirety of galactic history. Some speak in basic, others in the ancient tongues of long-dead civilizations, but all carry the same underlying message. They are calling to you specifically, using names and titles that no one outside of the most classified Imperial archives should know. Dr. Thorne, the voices whisper through the Force, their words bypassing your ears entirely and resonating directly in your consciousness. Seeker of hidden truths, student of forgotten lore, heir to the legacy of inquiry that spans 10,000 years. You have come at last to the place where knowledge and hunger merge into something greater than either could achieve alone. The docking bay that receives your ship is a marvel of engineering that should not be possible. The chamber adjusts its size and configuration to accommodate the Seeker's lament perfectly, as if the construct has been observing your approach and preparing for your arrival. Atmospheric fields maintain breathable air while gravity generators create a consistent sense of up and down, despite the chamber's location deep within the structure's impossible geometry. Master Valeth arms himself with recording devices and sample containers, but his hands shake slightly as he makes final preparations. 40 years of theoretical study, he mutters, more to himself than to you. 4 decades of piecing together fragments and hints, and now we stand on the threshold of answers that may be more terrible than the questions that drove us here. The interior of the construct defies conventional description. Corridors stretch in directions that should not exist, their walls covered with inscriptions that shift and change as you observe them. The text appears to be written in every language that has ever existed, with new words appearing even as you watch, as if the structure itself is adding to its own documentation in real time. The writing speaks of transformations, of consciousness freed from the limitations of flesh, of power that transcends the boundaries between life and death. Your first major discovery comes in what appears to be a memorial chamber, though the nature of what is being memorialized becomes clear only gradually. Thousands of crystalline formations fill the space, each one containing what looks like a preserved moment in time. As you approach the nearest crystal, images begin to play within its depths, showing the final moments of a Sith Lord whose name has been erased from all official records. The figure in the crystal is clearly in the midst of some kind of ritual, standing within a circle of arcane symbols, while energy of impossible brightness surrounds him. But rather than being consumed by the power he has summoned, he appears to be merging with it, his physical form becoming translucent as his consciousness expands beyond the confines of his body. The last image in the crystal shows not death, but transformation, as the Sith Lord's essence becomes one with the energy that surrounds him. The eternal ritual. Master Valathi breathes, his voice filled with awe and horror in equal measure. They did not die. They transcended physical existence entirely, becoming beings of pure will and hunger. But look at the cost. The cost becomes apparent as you examine more of the crystalline formations. Each one contains the preserved final moments of a different Sith Lord, but the transformations are not uniform. Some achieved the transcendence depicted in the first crystal, merging successfully with the cosmic forces they had summoned. Others were consumed entirely, their essence scattered across dimensions beyond human comprehension. Still others became something between the two extremes, trapped in a state of partial transformation that leaves them neither fully alive nor completely transcended. The memorial chamber contains a central holocron that activates automatically as you approach. The figure that appears is unlike any Sith Lord you have studied, its form shifting between solid matter and pure energy, its voice carrying harmonics that seem to originate from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Greetings, inheritors of our legacy," the figure intones, its words causing the very air to vibrate with power. "You have come seeking knowledge of our fate, driven by curiosity that marks you as worthy of partial revelation. Know this, the Sith Empire did not fall to external enemies or internal strife. We chose to abandon the limitations of mortality to become something greater than any living being has ever achieved." The holocron's message continues, revealing fragments of the process that allowed the true Sith to transcend physical existence. References to the hunger that drives all consciousness, to the eternal throne that can channel the life force of entire star systems, to the silence that represents the ultimate goal of their transformation. But again, crucial details are missing, edited out with surgical precision. The great work continues, the holocron declares, its form becoming more solid as it speaks. Even now we prepare for the final phase, the moment when the boundaries between dimensions will collapse entirely and we will reclaim our dominion over the galaxy. The living beings who currently inhabit these stars are not our enemies, they are our inheritance, resources to be consumed when the time of harvest arrives. The implications of this message hit you like a physical blow. The True Sith Empire has not vanished into history. They have been watching, waiting, preparing for a return that will not restore their physical forms, but will allow them to consume the life force of every living being in the galaxy. The surgical editing of historical records, the careful removal of crucial information, the coordinated effort to obscure their true fate all serve a single purpose: to ensure that their prey remains ignorant of the approaching harvest. Master Valeth staggers as the full scope of the revelation becomes clear. "They are not gone," he whispers, his face pale with the weight of understanding. "They are everywhere and nowhere, existing in the spaces between reality, feeding on the energy generated by conflict and suffering. Every war, every tragedy, every moment of pain in the galaxy has been nourishment for their continued existence." The construct around you begins to respond to your growing understanding, its whispers becoming more insistent, more personal. The voices speak of power beyond imagination, of consciousness freed from the constraints of mortality, of the opportunity to join the ranks of the transcended, rather than remaining among the resources to be consumed. The temptation in their words is almost overwhelming, promising answers to questions that have driven your entire career, knowledge that would make you the greatest scholar in galactic history. But beneath the seductive promises lies something that makes your blood run cold. The construct is not merely a memorial or archive. It is a recruitment center, a place where the transformed Sith evaluate potential candidates for their ranks. The knowledge it offers comes with a price: the abandonment of your humanity, the surrender of your physical existence, the acceptance of a hunger that can never be satisfied. As you and Master Valeth prepare to leave the memorial chamber, the construct makes one final attempt to convince you to remain. The whispers become a chorus, thousands of voices speaking in unison, offering revelations that would reshape your understanding of the universe. They speak of the true nature of the Force, of the cosmic cycles that govern the rise and fall of civilizations, of the ultimate destiny that awaits all conscious beings. "You cannot leave unchanged," the voices declare, their words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Knowledge once gained cannot be forgotten. Understanding once achieved cannot be denied. You carry within you now the seed of transformation, the beginning of the hunger that will eventually consume your attachment to mortality." The journey back to the Seeker's Lament becomes a test of will as the construct attempts to prevent your departure. Corridors that led straight to the docking bay now curve in impossible directions, creating mazes that seem designed to confuse and disorient. The whispers follow you, speaking of the futility of resistance, of the inevitable nature of the transformation that awaits all conscious beings. But you press forward, driven by a determination that surprises even yourself. The knowledge you have gained is terrible, but it is also necessary. Somewhere in the galaxy, others must know the truth about the True Sith Empire's fate. The harvest they speak of can only be prevented if enough people understand the nature of the threat they face. Aboard your ship, as the nexus of whispers disappears behind you, you and Master Valeth attempt to process what you have learned. The recordings and data you have gathered paint a picture of a transformation so complete that it challenges every assumption about the nature of existence. The true Sith have not died, but they have also not remained the same. They have become something new, something that exists in the spaces between dimensions, something that feeds on the life force of conscious beings. The coordinates in the holocron lead to 2 more locations. Master Valeth reports, his voice hollow with exhaustion: the Shadow Temple, where the transformation process was perfected, and the Throne of Silence, where the final phase of their plan is being prepared. But I fear that each revelation will bring us closer to a truth that our minds were never meant to comprehend. The ship's sensors detect another transmission as you prepare for the next jump to hyperspace. This one is different from the recruiting message you received at the Nexus of Whispers. It carries a warning, broadcast on frequencies used by deep space explorers, speaking of star systems that have gone silent, of entire civilizations that have simply vanished without explanation. The silence spreads. The transmission warns, its source impossible to trace. 3 more systems have gone dark this cycle, their populations simply gone without any sign of struggle or evacuation. The pattern matches historical records of similar disappearances dating back over 1,000 years. Someone is harvesting entire worlds, and the rate of consumption is accelerating. The transmission cuts off, leaving you with the terrible realization that the True Sith Empire's plan is not some distant threat. It is happening now, has been happening for centuries, and the accelerating rate of disappearances suggests that the final phase is approaching. The harvest they spoke of is not a future event, but an ongoing process, one that has been consuming entire civilizations while the galaxy remains ignorant of the true nature of the threat. As the Seeker's Lament enters hyperspace, carrying you toward the Shadow Temple, you find yourself changed by the knowledge you have gained. The whispers from the construct continue to echo in your mind, speaking of power and transcendence, of hunger and eternal existence. Part of you understands now why the true Sith chose their path, why they abandoned mortality in favor of something greater. But another part of you, the part that remains human, recoils from the implications of their transformation. The price of their transcendence is not just their own humanity, but the continued existence of every other conscious being in the galaxy. They have become cosmic predators, feeding on the life force of entire worlds, growing stronger with each civilization they consume. The stars blur past the viewport as your ship carries you deeper into the unknown regions, toward revelations that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the nature of power, consciousness, and the true cost of transcending the limitations of mortality. The Shadow Temple materializes before you as the Seeker's Lament drops out of hyperspace, a structure that seems to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Unlike the gleaming construct of the Nexus of Whispers, this temple appears to be carved from living shadow itself, its dark walls shifting and flowing like liquid obsidian frozen in time. The very sight of it makes your eyes water, as if your visual cortex is struggling to process architecture that follows no laws of physics your mind can comprehend. Master Valith studies the readings from the ship's sensors with growing confusion. The energy signatures are contradictory, he reports, his voice tight with concentration. The structure registers as both ancient and newly constructed, as if it exists in a state of temporal flux. Some sections appear to be millions of years old, while others seem to have been completed mere moments ago. As you approach the temple, a sense of profound relief washes over you. The whispers that have haunted your thoughts since leaving the Nexus of Whispers fade to a barely perceptible murmur, replaced by something that feels almost like silence. The constant pressure of unseen observation lifts from your shoulders, and for the first time in days, you feel as if you can breathe freely. The temple's docking bay receives your ship with the same adaptive technology you encountered at the Nexus. But the atmosphere here is different. Where the construct felt alive with malevolent intelligence, the Shadow Temple feels empty, abandoned, as if whatever purpose it once served has been completed and its occupants have moved on to other concerns. Your exploration of the temple's interior reveals a structure designed around a central chamber that defies easy description. The walls are covered with murals depicting what appears to be the final days of the True Sith Empire, showing great battles between different factions of Sith Lords. The artwork is incredibly detailed, capturing not just the physical aspects of the conflicts, but the emotional weight of the participants' choices. Civil war. Master Valith breathes, his voice filled with the satisfaction of a scholar who has finally found the missing piece of a complex puzzle. The True Sith Empire did not vanish mysteriously. They destroyed themselves in a final, devastating conflict that left no survivors. The evidence seems overwhelming. Scattered throughout the temple are holocrons containing testimonies from Sith Lords who describe the growing tensions within the Empire, the philosophical differences that divided the leadership, the gradual breakdown of the unity that had once made them the most powerful force in the galaxy. The recordings speak of betrayal, of ancient alliances crumbling under the weight of ambition and paranoia. One holocron contains the testimony of Lord Malgus Keth, a Sith whose name appears in several of the fragmented archives you studied on Korriban. His image flickers with the instability of a damaged recording, but his words carry the weight of absolute conviction. The Empire tears itself apart, he declares, his voice heavy with sorrow and anger. Lords who once stood as brothers in the darkness now seek each other's destruction. The unity forged in conquest crumbles before the hunger for individual power. We have become our own greatest enemy, and the galaxy will inherit the ashes of our folly. The testimony continues, describing battles that span entire star systems, conflicts so devastating that they leave behind wounds in the Force itself. Lord Keth speaks of the final confrontation, a battle that will determine the fate of the true Sith Empire once and for all. His words paint a picture of desperate warriors choosing mutual destruction over the possibility of defeat. Better to die as Sith than to live as slaves to our own diminished ambitions, he concludes, his image beginning to fade as the holocron's power wanes. The Empire ends with us, but it ends on our terms, claimed by none save the darkness we have always served. Master Valeth examines additional evidence scattered throughout the temple, finding weapons that bear the marks of internecine warfare, personal effects that suggest hasty evacuations, and communication logs that detail the breakdown of the Empire's administrative structure. The picture that emerges is one of a civilization that achieved incredible power only to be consumed by its own internal contradictions. It makes sense, he observes, his voice carrying the relief of a man who has finally found rational explanations for inexplicable events. The true Sith Empire was built on the principle that power justifies any action, that strength alone determines worth. Such a philosophy inevitably leads to internal conflict as each individual seeks to prove their supremacy over all others. The temple's central chamber contains what appears to be a memorial to the Empire's final battle, a massive holographic display that shows the positions of fleets and armies during the conflict that ended their civilization. The tactical information is incredibly detailed, showing not just the movements of ships and troops, but the strategic thinking behind each decision. It is clear that the final battle was not a chaotic melee, but a carefully planned mutual annihilation. You study the holographic display with growing satisfaction, feeling the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. The mysterious disappearance of the true Sith Empire was not so mysterious after all. They had simply done what countless civilizations before them had done, destroying themselves through internal conflict when external enemies proved insufficient to unite them. The relief of having a rational explanation for the Empire's fate is almost overwhelming. The whispers that have haunted your thoughts since beginning this investigation fade to insignificance, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of mysteries solved and questions answered. The cosmic horror that seemed to lurk at the edges of your previous discoveries resolves into the familiar tragedy of a civilization that rose too high and fell too far. Master Valeth begins documenting the evidence with methodical precision, his relief evident in every movement. The galactic historical community will be astounded, he declares, his voice filled with anticipation. We have solved one of the greatest mysteries in recorded history. The true Sith Empire's fate was not supernatural or inexplicable. It was the inevitable result of a flawed philosophy taken to its logical conclusion. But as you prepare to leave the Shadow Temple, carrying with you the evidence of the Empire's self-destruction, something nags at the edge of your consciousness. The whispers that have plagued you since leaving the Nexus of Whispers have not disappeared entirely. They linger just beyond the threshold of perception, speaking words that your conscious mind cannot quite process, but that leave you with a growing sense of unease. The journey back to the Seeker's Lament should be a triumphant procession, but instead you find yourself moving with increasing urgency. The temple's corridors, which seemed empty and abandoned during your exploration, now feel charged with a subtle presence. Nothing you can identify directly, but the sense of being observed grows stronger with each step. Master Valeth notices your discomfort, but attributes it to the natural anxiety of leaving a place where you have made such significant discoveries. The mind often rebels against accepting simple explanations after expecting complex ones, he observes, his voice carrying the wisdom of decades spent studying the psychological aspects of historical research. We came here expecting cosmic horror and found instead the familiar tragedy of civilizations that destroy themselves. The adjustment can be unsettling. Aboard your ship, as the Shadow Temple disappears behind you, you attempt to process the evidence you have gathered. The recordings, the battle plans, the personal testimonies all point to the same conclusion. The True Sith Empire ended not with a bang but with a whimper, consumed by the very darkness that had once made them invincible. But the whispers continue, speaking words that contradict everything you have learned. They speak of deception, of misdirection, of evidence carefully placed to lead inquiring minds away from more dangerous truths. The voices carry a tone of amusement, as if the beings that speak through them are entertained by your willingness to accept the obvious explanation. The children of the galaxy seek comfort in familiar patterns. The whispers murmur, their words bypassing your ears and resonating directly in your consciousness. They prefer the tragedy of self-destruction to the horror of transformation. But patterns can be manufactured, evidence can be placed, and even the most careful investigators can be led to conclusions that serve purposes greater than their own understanding. The implications of the whisper's words send chills through your entire being. If the evidence at the Shadow Temple was deliberately placed, if the testimonies were manufactured, if the entire Civil War scenario was constructed to mislead future investigators, then the True Sith Empire's fate remains as mysterious as ever. Worse, it suggests that they possess the resources and foresight to manipulate historical records on a scale that defies comprehension. Master Valeth reviews the data you have collected, his satisfaction gradually giving way to doubt as he notices inconsistencies that were not apparent during your initial investigation. The technological signatures are wrong, he admits, his voice heavy with reluctance. The holocrons we found in the temple are too new, their construction techniques too advanced for the time period they claim to represent. Someone with access to modern technology has been creating false historical records. The realization that you have been deliberately misled transforms your relief into something approaching panic. If the True Sith Empire has the ability to manipulate evidence at this level, to create false temples and fabricated testimonies, then their reach extends far beyond the unknown regions. They have been actively managing the investigation of their own fate, guiding researchers to conclusions that serve their purposes. The Civil War explanation is too convenient, you realize, your voice hollow with understanding. It provides a rational explanation for an irrational disappearance, satisfying our need for logical conclusions while obscuring the true nature of what happened to them. We have been playing a game whose rules we do not understand, following a path that was laid out for us by forces we cannot comprehend. The ship's communication array picks up another transmission as you prepare for your next hyperspace jump. This one carries the voice of Lord Keth, the same Sith whose testimony you recorded in the Shadow Temple. But the message is different, carrying implications that make your blood run cold. The deception is complete. The transmission declares, its source impossible to trace. The scholars have accepted the false narrative, finding comfort in the familiar pattern of self-destruction. They return to their archives believing they have solved the mystery, never suspecting that the true horror lies not in our disappearance, but in our continued presence. The harvest continues, and the investigators become part of the crop they sought to understand. The transmission cuts off, leaving you with the terrible certainty that your investigation has been compromised from the beginning. The True Sith Empire has not vanished into history. They have been watching, guiding, manipulating every step of your search for the truth. The evidence you have gathered, the conclusions you have reached, the sense of satisfaction you felt at solving the mystery all serve their purposes rather than your own. Master Valeth stares at the communication logs with the expression of a man whose fundamental assumptions about reality have been shattered. "We have been tools in a plan we cannot comprehend," he whispers, his voice filled with horror and awe in equal measure. "Every step we have taken, every discovery we have made, every conclusion we have reached has been anticipated and guided by forces that exist beyond our understanding." The stars blur past the viewport as the Seeker's lament carries you toward your next destination, but the familiar sight of hyperspace no longer provides comfort. Instead, it seems to mock your efforts, a reminder that even the vast distances between stars cannot protect you from the attention of beings who have transcended the limitations of physical existence. The whispers grow stronger as you travel, speaking of patience and planning, of schemes that span millennia and manipulations that extend across the galaxy. They speak of the approaching harvest, of the final phase of a plan that has been in motion since before the Republic drew its first breath. They speak of your role in that plan, of the knowledge you carry, and the purposes it will serve. The scholars have played their part, the voices murmur, their words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. They have gathered the evidence, reached the conclusions, and spread the comfortable lie that will keep the galaxy sleeping until the moment of awakening arrives. The True Sith Empire thanks them for their service and promises them a place of honor in the new order that will emerge from the ashes of the old. The communication ends, leaving you with the terrible understanding that your investigation has not been a search for truth but a participation in deception. The True Sith Empire has not vanished, has not been destroyed, has not succumbed to internal conflict. They have evolved, transcended, become something that operates beyond the boundaries of conventional existence, and they have been using your expertise to spread misinformation about their fate. As the Seeker's lament prepares for its next hyperspace jump, you realize that every assumption you have made about your investigation must be questioned. The comfortable conclusion of civil war and self-destruction has been revealed as a carefully constructed lie, designed to satisfy the academic mind while obscuring a truth far more terrible than any conventional explanation could provide. The coordinates for your next destination pulse on the navigation display, leading toward a region of space that exists beyond the edge of even the most speculative star charts. Master Valeth studies the readings with growing trepidation, understanding that each step forward takes you further from the familiar patterns of galactic civilization and deeper into realms where the True Sith Empire's influence grows stronger. "We cannot turn back now," you declare, though your voice carries the weight of uncertainty. Whatever deception we have uncovered, whatever manipulation we have been subjected to, the truth still waits to be discovered. The True Sith Empire wants us to accept their false narrative, to return to our archives, believing we have solved their mystery. The very fact that they have gone to such lengths to mislead us proves that the real answer poses a threat to their plans. The hyperspace jump begins, carrying you away from the Shadow Temple and its carefully constructed lies, toward whatever revelation awaits in the depths of the unknown regions. But as the stars fade into the swirling chaos of hyperspace, you cannot shake the feeling that you are not traveling toward the truth, but being drawn into an even more elaborate web of deception, one whose ultimate purpose remains hidden in the spaces between the stars. The emergence from hyperspace brings with it a sight that defies every principle of astrophysics you have ever studied. Before you stretches not a star system, but a region of space where reality itself seems to have been folded and twisted into impossible configurations. Stars exist where they should not. Planets orbit in patterns that violate gravitational laws, and streams of pure energy flow between celestial bodies like rivers of light connecting islands of matter. "The Nexus Worlds," Master Valeth whispers, his voice filled with awe and terror in equal measure. Theoretical constructs that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, places where the barriers between different planes of existence have been deliberately weakened. The ancient texts spoke of such places, but I never believed they could actually exist. The Seeker's Lament's sensors struggle to process the readings from this impossible region of space. Gravity flows in directions that should not exist. Time moves at different rates depending on your position relative to the various celestial bodies, and the very concept of distance becomes meaningless when space itself can be folded to bring distant objects into close proximity. Your destination becomes apparent as you navigate deeper into the Nexus worlds. A massive structure floats in the center of the impossible star system, a library so vast that it dwarfs entire moons. Its architecture defies conventional description, with sections that exist in dimensions your eyes cannot fully perceive, creating optical illusions that make navigation treacherous and measurement impossible. The Infinite Archive. Master Valeth breathes, his voice carrying the reverence of a scholar who has spent his entire life dreaming of access to ultimate knowledge. Legend claims it contains every piece of information that has ever existed, or ever will exist, organized according to principles that transcend linear time and conventional causality. If the truth about the true Sith Empire's fate can be found anywhere, it will be here. The docking process requires skills you never learned in any piloting course, as the archive's receiving bays exist in a state of constant flux between dimensions. Guidance comes not from conventional navigation equipment, but from whispers that seem to emanate from the structure itself. Voices that speak in languages you do not recognize, but somehow understand, directing your ship toward berths that materialize just in time to receive you. The interior of the Infinite Archive challenges every assumption about the nature of knowledge and information storage. Corridors stretch in directions that should not exist, their walls lined with shelves that contain not just physical books and holocrons, but crystallized thoughts, preserved memories and concepts given tangible form. The very air shimmers with fragments of information, ideas that have achieved independent existence and float freely through the vast chambers. Master Valeth moves through the archive with the careful reverence of a pilgrim entering a sacred shrine. His hands shake as he reaches toward shelves that contain knowledge from civilizations that existed before the galaxy's first hyperlane was mapped. Books written in languages that predate the development of sentient speech, holocrons that contain the preserved consciousness of beings who transcended physical existence eons ago. Every question that has ever been asked, he murmurs, his voice barely audible above the whispers that fill the air around you. Every answer that has ever been sought, all of it preserved here, waiting for minds capable of comprehending its significance. We could spend lifetimes in this place and barely scratch the surface of what it contains. But your investigation is guided by purpose rather than general curiosity. The sections of the archive that contain information about the true Sith Empire reveal themselves as you approach, the very structure of the library responding to your intent and rearranging itself to present the knowledge you seek. Shelves slide into new positions, corridors reconfigure themselves, and entire chambers materialize around collections of information relevant to your search. The evidence you discover here paints a picture far more complex than anything you encountered in the Shadow Temple's fabricated records. The true Sith Empire did not destroy itself through civil war, nor did it simply vanish into the unknown regions. Instead, it undertook a project so ambitious and terrifying that the very concept challenges your understanding of what is possible. Ancient texts speak of the Eternal Project, a millennia-spanning effort to transcend not just physical existence, but the limitations of consciousness itself. The true Sith discovered that the Force, which other civilizations viewed as an energy field to be manipulated, was actually something far more fundamental to the nature of reality. It was not merely power to be wielded, but the very substance from which existence itself was constructed. They learned to consume the Force directly. Master Valeth reads from a crystallized memory that plays its contents directly into his consciousness, not just to channel dark side energy or manipulate midichlorians, but to devour the fundamental substrate of reality itself. The process transformed them into beings of pure hunger, entities that exist in the spaces between dimensions and feed on the life force of entire star systems. The implications of this revelation are staggering. The True Sith Empire did not conquer worlds in the conventional sense. They consumed them, draining not just the life from the beings that inhabited them, but the very force energy that allowed those worlds to exist. The disappearances that have been occurring throughout galactic history, the star systems that have simply vanished without explanation, represent not natural phenomena, but feeding events. Deeper in the archive, you discover records that detail the scope of the transformation process. The most powerful Sith Lords underwent the procedure willingly, surrendering their physical forms in exchange for existence as entities of pure will and hunger. But the process was not limited to the elite. Entire populations of Sith-controlled worlds were subjected to forced transformation, their consciousness harvested and incorporated into the collective hunger of the transcended empire. The numbers are beyond comprehension, you realize, your voice hollow with the weight of understanding. Trillions of beings, entire civilizations, all transformed into components of a collective entity that exists beyond the boundaries of physical space. The True Sith Empire did not disappear. It became something that encompasses scales of existence we cannot even imagine. The archive contains detailed technical specifications for the transformation process, information that makes your mind recoil from the implications. The procedure requires not just the willing participation of the subject, but the consumption of force energy from other living beings. Each transformation is powered by the death of thousands, sometimes millions, of force-sensitive individuals whose life energy is channeled into the transcendence of a single Sith Lord. Master Valith discovers records that detail the Empire's long-term planning, documents that reveal a patience and foresight that spans geological ages. The transformation process was not an immediate goal, but the culmination of a plan that began before the Republic's formation. Every major galactic conflict, every war between light and dark, every moment of suffering and death throughout recorded history has served to feed the growing hunger of the transcended Sith. "They have been farming us," he whispers, his voice filled with horror and awe. "The entire galaxy, every living being within it, represents nothing more than a resource to be harvested when the time is right. The wars, the conflicts, the endless cycle of violence and suffering, all of it has been orchestrated to generate the force energy they require for their continued existence." The archive's deepest chambers contain information about the current state of the transcended empire, records that are updated in real time as events unfold across the galaxy. The beings that were once Sith Lords now exist as a collective consciousness that spans multiple dimensions, their individual identities merged into a single entity of incomprehensible power and hunger. But the collective is not unified in its goals. The archive reveals fractures within the transcended empire, philosophical differences that have carried over from their physical existence and created competing factions within the collective consciousness. Some seek the immediate consumption of all life in the galaxy, while others prefer a more gradual approach that ensures the continued generation of force energy over extended periods. The patient faction has been dominant for millennia. You read from records that detail the internal politics of entities that exist beyond conventional understanding. They established the current system of controlled conflict and managed suffering, ensuring a steady supply of force energy while preventing the complete collapse of galactic civilization. But the hungry faction grows stronger with each passing year, and their influence over the collective's decisions increases as the cosmic alignments approach their optimal configuration. The cosmic alignments referenced in the records correspond to astronomical events that occur once every 1,000 years, when the barriers between dimensions grow thin and the transcended Sith can manifest more directly in physical reality. The approaching convergence represents not just an opportunity for increased activity, but the moment when the hungry faction will have enough influence to override the patient faction's preference for gradual consumption. Peaceful moments in your exploration of the archive come when you discover chambers dedicated to the preservation of beauty and wonder rather than horror and manipulation. Gardens of crystallized music where the greatest compositions in galactic history have been given physical form. Galleries of preserved moments where acts of love and sacrifice have been captured for eternal contemplation. Libraries of dreams where the hopes and aspirations of countless beings have been collected and preserved. These chambers provide respite from the cosmic horror of your discoveries, reminding you that existence encompasses more than just predation and consumption. The force energy that the transcended Sith seek to devour is the same energy that creates art, inspires compassion, and drives beings toward acts of selfless heroism. The very thing they consume is what gives life meaning and beauty. Master Valeth spends hours in one such chamber, surrounded by preserved memories of parents holding their children, of lovers separated by war finding each other again, of ordinary beings choosing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. The contrast between these moments of pure goodness and the cosmic horror of the Sith's transformation provides a stark reminder of what is at stake in the approaching convergence. "This is what they seek to consume," he observes, his voice heavy with emotion. "Not just life force or force energy in the abstract, but the capacity for love, for hope, for the choice to place others' welfare above our own. They do not simply kill their victims. They devour the very qualities that make existence meaningful." The archive's records reveal that the transcended Sith are not the only entities of their kind in the universe. Similar transformations have occurred in other galaxies, other dimensions, creating a network of collective consciousness entities that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional space and time. The approaching convergence will not just allow the Sith to manifest more directly in this galaxy, but will open pathways for these other entities to participate in the harvest. The scope is beyond anything we imagined, you realize, studying star charts that show the positions of consumed galaxies throughout the universe. This is not just about our galaxy or our civilization. It is about the fundamental nature of existence itself, about whether consciousness will be allowed to develop freely or will be harvested to feed entities that exist beyond the boundaries of individual identity. As your exploration of the Infinite Archive nears its end, you discover records that detail the Sith's preparations for the final phase of their plan. The Eternal Throne referenced in previous discoveries is not a single device, but a network of instruments scattered throughout the galaxy, each one capable of channeling the life force of entire star systems into the collective consciousness of the Transcended Empire. The devices have been hidden in plain sight, disguised as everything from ancient monuments to modern space stations, their true purpose concealed by layers of misdirection and false information. When activated simultaneously during the cosmic convergence, they will create a galaxy-spanning network capable of draining the force energy from every living being within the boundaries of known space. The activation sequence has already begun, Master Valeth reports, his voice tight with urgency as he studies the real-time records. 3 of the devices have come online within the past standard year, and the rate of activation is accelerating. The final convergence is not some distant threat. It is happening now, and we may already be too late to prevent it. The whispers that have haunted your thoughts throughout this investigation grow stronger as you prepare to leave the Infinite Archive, but their tone has changed. Where before they carried promises and threats, now they speak with something approaching respect. The knowledge you have gained has elevated you in their estimation, transforming you from ignorant prey into something that approaches an equal. The scholars have exceeded expectations. The voices murmur, their words carrying harmonics that resonate in dimensions beyond the 3 your senses can perceive. They have grasped concepts that break lesser minds, have absorbed truths that would drive ordinary beings to madness. They have earned the right to witness the final phase of the great work, to observe the transformation of the galaxy from chaos into perfect order. But beneath the apparent respect lies something that makes your blood run cold. The transcended Sith are not threatened by your knowledge, but pleased by it. Your understanding of their plan does not represent a danger to their goals, but a fulfillment of them. The very act of comprehending the scope of their transformation has changed you in ways that you are only beginning to understand. The journey back to the Seeker's Lament takes you through chambers you did not visit during your initial exploration, sections of the archive that seem to have materialized specifically for your departure. These areas contain information about resistance movements, about techniques for shielding consciousness from the hunger of transcended entities, about the possibility that the approaching harvest can still be prevented. But the information comes with warnings, cautions about the price of resistance and the cost of defying forces that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. The very act of opposing the transcended Sith requires sacrifices that may be greater than the civilization you seek to protect, choices that will challenge every assumption about the value of individual existence versus collective survival. The coordinates provided by the Infinite Archive lead you to a region of space that exists beyond the edge of all known star charts, a place where the very concept of location becomes meaningless. As the Seeker's Lament emerges from hyperspace, you find yourself surrounded not by stars or planets, but by structures that seem to have been grown rather than built, organic constructs that pulse with bioluminescent patterns and respond to your presence with movements that suggest awareness. The living tombs, Master Valeth whispers, his voice filled with wonder and revulsion in equal measure, the final resting places of the Sith Lords who underwent the transformation process. But they are not truly dead, nor are they entirely alive. They exist in a state between states, their consciousness preserved within structures that continue to evolve and grow long after their physical forms were consumed. The largest of these tomb structures dwarfs your ship by several orders of magnitude, its surface covered with patterns that shift and change as you observe them. Biomechanical appendages extend from its hull, reaching toward the Seeker's Lament with movements that suggest both curiosity and hunger. The very sight of these extensions makes your skin crawl, as if your body recognizes them as something fundamentally hostile to organic existence. The tomb's docking bay opens with a sound that resembles a sigh, expelling atmosphere that carries scents of decay and transformation. The air itself seems thick with the presence of something that was once alive but has become something else entirely, something that retains the memory of life while rejecting its limitations. Every breath you take fills your lungs with particles that taste of copper and ozone, flavors that speak of fundamental changes to the nature of matter itself. Inside the tomb, you discover chambers that defy conventional description. The walls pulse with veins of energy that carry what might once have been blood, but now flows as liquid force power. The architecture follows no recognizable pattern, creating spaces that expand and contract according to the emotional state of their occupants. Corridors branch and merge like the passages of some cosmic nervous system, carrying information between different sections of the structure in the form of electrical impulses that you can actually see. Your exploration leads you to a central chamber where the preserved consciousness of the tomb's original occupant maintains a form of existence that challenges every assumption about the nature of life and death. The entity that greets you was once Lord Vectis Mua, a Sith whose name appears in the oldest records of the True Empire. But the being that speaks to you now bears little resemblance to anything that could be called human. Welcome, seekers of forbidden knowledge, the entity intones, its voice emerging not from any visible mouth, but from the very walls of the chamber around you. You have come far to witness the fruits of our great work, to understand the transformation that elevates consciousness beyond the crude limitations of flesh and mortality. Behold what we have become, and tremble at the beauty of true transcendence. The entity's form shifts and flows as it speaks, sometimes appearing as a vaguely humanoid figure composed of swirling energy, other times manifesting as geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Its consciousness seems to extend throughout the entire tomb structure, making it impossible to determine where the being ends and its environment begins. The very concept of individual identity becomes meaningless when applied to something that exists in this state of transformed existence. Lord Vectis reveals the true scope of the transformation process that consumed the True Sith Empire. Details that make the information you gathered from the Infinite Archive seem incomplete by comparison. The transcendence achieved by the Sith Lords was not a single event but an ongoing process, one that continues to evolve and expand with each passing millennium. The entities that emerged from the transformation are not static beings but dynamic forces that grow stronger and more complex as they consume additional force energy. The hunger is not a weakness but a strength, the entity explains, its words carrying harmonics that resonate in your bones. Each act of consumption adds new capabilities, new dimensions of existence, new possibilities for the exercise of will over reality. We who began as individual Sith Lords have become something greater, a collective consciousness that spans galaxies and encompasses scales of power that no single being could ever achieve. The revelation that shakes you to your core comes when Lord Vectis demonstrates the true extent of the transcended Sith's capabilities. With a gesture that exists in dimensions beyond the three your eyes can perceive, the entity opens windows into distant parts of the galaxy, showing you events that are happening in real time across vast distances. You witness star systems where entire populations simply vanish between one moment and the next, their life force consumed so completely that no trace of their existence remains. The harvest has been ongoing for millennia, Lord Vectis continues, its tone carrying the satisfaction of a farmer discussing a successful crop. Every war, every conflict, every moment of suffering throughout galactic history has served our purposes. The beings who inhabit these worlds believe themselves to be living independent lives, making their own choices, determining their own fates. They do not understand that they are components in a vast agricultural system designed to produce the force energy we require for our continued evolution. Master Baelith staggers as the full implications of this revelation become clear. The entire structure of galactic civilization, every major historical event, every rise and fall of empires and republics, has been orchestrated by beings whose patience spans geological ages and whose power extends across dimensional boundaries. The illusion of free will that drives all sentient beings is exactly that, an illusion maintained to ensure the continued production of the force energy that feeds the transcended Sith. But the system is not perfect, Lord Vectis admits, its form solidifying slightly, as if the topic requires more focused attention. There are always those who resist, who refuse to accept their role in the greater design. Some possess natural immunity to our influence, while others develop resistance through training or sheer force of will. These individuals represent inefficiencies in our agricultural system, sources of waste that reduce the overall yield of our harvest. The entity's revelation continues, painting a picture of resistance movements that have existed throughout galactic history, secret organizations dedicated to fighting influences they could not fully understand. Jedi who develop techniques for shielding their consciousness from external manipulation, Sith who refuse to participate in the transformation process, ordinary beings who somehow develop the ability to perceive the true nature of their reality. The resistance has always been small, fragmented, lacking the coordination necessary to pose a significant threat to our operations. Lord Vectis observes, its tone carrying notes of amusement and condescension, but their very existence represents a form of waste that we can no longer tolerate. The approaching convergence will eliminate these inefficiencies permanently, ensuring that every scrap of force energy in the galaxy contributes to our continued evolution. The demonstration that follows this explanation leaves you speechless with horror and awe. Lord Vectis shows you the activation process for the devices hidden throughout the galaxy, the Eternal Throne Network that will allow the transcended Sith to drain the force energy from every living being within the boundaries of known space. The devices are not merely machines but extensions of the transformed Sith Lords themselves, organs of consumption that can channel life force across vast distances. The network grows stronger with each activation. The entity explains as you watch real-time displays showing the current status of devices across the galaxy. Already, 17 of the primary nodes have come online, and the rate of activation accelerates as the cosmic convergence approaches. When the network reaches full operational capacity, the harvest will be completed within a matter of days, transforming every force-sensitive being in the galaxy into components of our collective consciousness. Master Valeth finds his voice long enough to ask the question that haunts both of your minds. What about the non-force-sensitive beings? The ordinary humans and aliens who make up the majority of galactic civilization. Lord Vectus responds with something that might once have been laughter, a sound that carries overtones of cosmic amusement and infinite patience. They will simply cease to exist, it replies, its tone suggesting that the fate of trillions of beings is a matter of no particular importance. The force energy that sustains their biological processes will be consumed along with that of the force-sensitive individuals. The galaxy will become a place of perfect silence, empty of the chaotic noise of uncontrolled consciousness, prepared for the next phase of our evolution. The scope of the planned genocide becomes clear as Lord Vectus provides additional details about the transformation process. The transcended Sith do not simply consume the force energy of their victims, but assimilate their consciousness into the collective entity that emerged from the original empire. Every being that dies during the harvest will become part of the vast unified intelligence that spans multiple dimensions and galaxies. But assimilation is not enslavement, the entity clarifies, apparently sensing your horror at the concept. The individual consciousness that joins our collective retains its essential nature while gaining access to the accumulated knowledge and power of all other components. Death becomes transformation, limitation becomes transcendence, and the chaotic cacophony of separate existence becomes the harmonious symphony of unified purpose. The offer that follows this explanation is delivered with the weight of cosmic inevitability. Lord Vectus extends an invitation for you and Master Valeth to undergo the transformation process voluntarily, to join the ranks of the transcended rather than waiting to be consumed during the harvest. The entity presents this choice as a privilege, an opportunity to maintain some degree of individual identity within the collective consciousness. Your knowledge and dedication have earned you this consideration, it explains, its form shifting to create patterns that suggest benevolence and wisdom. The transformation can be gentle for those who accept it willingly, preserving aspects of personality and memory that would be lost during forced assimilation. You could continue your research and exploration as components of our collective, contributing to discoveries that span the entire universe rather than being limited to the narrow confines of a single galaxy. The temptation in the entity's words is almost overwhelming. The promise of unlimited knowledge, of consciousness freed from the constraints of mortality, of the ability to explore mysteries that exist beyond the boundaries of physical space, all speak to the deepest desires that drove you to begin this investigation. But beneath the seductive promises lies the terrible cost, the understanding that acceptance would mean becoming part of the very force that seeks to destroy everything you have sought to protect. Master Valeth's response comes as a whisper that carries the weight of absolute conviction. We cannot, he breathes, his voice filled with sorrow and determination in equal measure. The knowledge we have gained, the truth we have uncovered, it must be shared with those who still have the power to resist. We cannot become part of the harvest, no matter what rewards are offered. Lord Vectus receives this rejection with something approaching approval, as if the entity expected and even hoped for such a response. The choice honors you, it acknowledges, its tone carrying notes of genuine respect. The harvest is more satisfying when the crop has had the opportunity to achieve its full potential. Your resistance will make the eventual assimilation more complete, more nourishing to our continued growth. The entity's final revelation comes as you prepare to leave the living tomb, a piece of information that transforms your understanding of your own investigation from the beginning. Every step of your journey, every discovery you have made, every conclusion you have reached has been guided and monitored by the transcended Sith. Your quest for knowledge has served their purposes rather than your own, providing them with entertainment and nourishment while advancing their ultimate goals. The scholars have played their roles perfectly, Lord Vectis observes, its form beginning to fade as the chamber around you starts to shift and change. They have uncovered the truth, experienced the appropriate horror and awe, and now carry within their consciousness the seed of transformation that will make their eventual assimilation more complete. The investigation has succeeded beyond all expectations, and the harvest draws ever closer to completion. As the Seeker's lament carries you away from the living tombs, the weight of what you have learned settles over you like a burial shroud. The True Sith Empire has not merely survived its apparent destruction, but has evolved into something that makes their original power seem insignificant by comparison. The approaching harvest represents not just the end of galactic civilization, but the transformation of every conscious being into components of a collective entity whose goals and desires exist beyond human comprehension. The whispers that have haunted your thoughts throughout this investigation grow stronger as you travel toward your next destination, but their nature has changed once again. They no longer speak of recruitment or temptation, but of inevitability, of the approaching moment when resistance will become meaningless and transformation will be the only option available to conscious beings anywhere in the galaxy. The journey deeper into the unknown regions takes you through regions of space where the very laws of physics seem to have been rewritten by forces beyond conventional understanding. Stars burn with colors that should not exist, planets orbit in configurations that defy gravitational mechanics, and the background radiation of space itself carries patterns that suggest the presence of vast intelligences manipulating reality at the quantum level. Master Valaith studies the readings from the ship's sensors with growing comprehension and mounting horror. The cosmic alignments are accelerating, he reports, his voice tight with the strain of processing information that challenges his fundamental understanding of astrophysics. The barriers between dimensions are collapsing faster than our models predicted. What we estimated would take decades is happening in months. What should take months is occurring in weeks. The destination revealed by Lord Vectis lies at the heart of this accelerating transformation, a region of space where the transcended Sith have been conducting experiments that span millennia. As the Seeker's lament approaches the coordinates, you begin to understand that you are not traveling toward a single location, but entering a vast laboratory where the fundamental nature of existence has been subjected to systematic manipulation. The first evidence of this manipulation becomes apparent when your ship's chronometers begin displaying contradictory readings. Time itself flows differently in this region, with some areas experiencing accelerated temporal flow while others seem frozen in moments that occurred centuries ago. The navigation computer struggles to plot courses through space where distance becomes meaningless and causality operates according to principles that exist beyond human comprehension. They have been experimenting with the very foundations of reality, you realize, watching as your instruments record impossibilities with mechanical precision. Not just consuming force energy or transforming consciousness, but actually altering the basic laws that govern existence itself. They are not merely parasites feeding on the galaxy. They are architects reshaping it according to their own design. The laboratory that emerges from the swirling chaos of twisted space defies description in any language designed for three-dimensional beings. Structures phase in and out of visibility as they exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, their purpose visible only when observed from angles that require your consciousness to stretch beyond its normal limitations. The very act of perceiving these constructs changes your understanding of what is possible, expanding your awareness to encompass scales of existence you never imagined. Master Valaith guides the ship toward what appears to be a docking facility, though the structure reshapes itself to accommodate your vessel rather than requiring you to navigate to a predetermined berth. The process feels uncomfortably organic, as if the laboratory itself is a living entity that regards your ship as food to be digested rather than visitors to be received. The experimentation has been ongoing for over 2 million years. Master Valeth reads from data streams that flow directly into his consciousness as you disembark. Multiple galaxies have served as test subjects, their populations subjected to different variations of the transformation process. Our galaxy represents the culmination of their research, the final experiment before they begin implementing their discoveries on a universal scale. The laboratory's interior contains chambers dedicated to research that spans every aspect of consciousness and existence. In one section, you discover tanks containing what were once entire civilizations, their populations reduced to pure consciousness and subjected to experiments designed to determine the optimal methods for harvesting force energy. The beings in these tanks have been aware and suffering for millennia, their pain serving as a source of nourishment for the entities conducting the research. Another chamber houses experiments in temporal manipulation, where the transcended Sith have been learning to consume not just the current force energy of their victims, but the potential energy of all the choices they might have made throughout their lives. The process allows them to drain beings of not just their present existence, but their entire timeline, erasing them from history so completely that reality adjusts to accommodate their absence. The scope of their capabilities has been growing exponentially, you observe, studying displays that show the results of experiments conducted across vast stretches of time and space. Each new technique they develop, each refinement to their transformation process, multiplies their power by orders of magnitude. They are not just consuming individual galaxies, they are learning to devour entire sections of the universe. The most disturbing chamber contains what the laboratory's systems identify as the Consciousness Forge, a device designed to create artificial beings from the harvested force energy of their victims. The transcended Sith have been experimenting with manufacturing sentient life specifically designed to be consumed, creating beings whose entire existence serves no purpose other than to provide nourishment for their continued evolution. Master Valeth discovers records that detail the true purpose of these experiments, information that makes the scope of the planned harvest seem small by comparison. The transcended Sith are not content to simply consume the force energy available in this universe. They are preparing to break through the barriers that separate different realities, gaining access to infinite versions of existence where they can repeat the process of consumption across countless parallel dimensions. The multiverse itself is their ultimate target, he whispers, his voice hollow with the weight of cosmic horror. Every possible reality, every variation of existence that could ever occur, all of it designed to feed their hunger for consciousness and power. They are not just planning to destroy our galaxy or our universe. They intend to consume the very concept of existence itself. The laboratory's central chamber houses the master control system for the Eternal Throne Network, a device that coordinates the activation of harvest nodes scattered throughout the galaxy. The system displays real-time information about the progress of the activation sequence, showing that over half of the primary nodes have already come online, and the rate of activation continues to accelerate. But the display also reveals something that fills you with a mixture of hope and terror. The resistance movements that Lord Vectus dismissed as insignificant inefficiencies have been more successful than the transcended Sith anticipated. Several of the harvest nodes have been damaged or destroyed by forces the control system cannot identify, and the overall efficiency of the network has been reduced by nearly 15%. There are others fighting back, you realize, studying patterns in the data that suggest coordinated resistance efforts. Across the galaxy, beings who understand the true nature of the threat are working to disrupt the harvest. The network can be damaged, the process can be interrupted. The transcended Sith are not as invincible as they want us to believe. The discovery of active resistance fills Master Valeth with renewed determination, though his analysis of the data reveals the enormous scope of the challenge facing any opposition movement. The resistance would need to destroy over 80% of the network nodes to prevent the harvest from reaching critical mass, he calculates, his voice carrying notes of both hope and despair. Even if every known resistance cell succeeded in their missions, it would not be enough to stop the process completely. The laboratory systems respond to your presence by providing additional information about the resistance movements, apparently viewing your interest as a form of scientific curiosity rather than potential participation. The data reveals that the most effective opposition has come from groups that have learned to shield their consciousness from detection, using techniques developed over millennia of study and experimentation. Some resistance cells consist of Jedi who have mastered advanced forms of force concealment, rendering themselves invisible to the perception of the transcended Sith. Others are composed of Sith who rejected the transformation process and went into hiding, using their knowledge of dark side techniques to develop countermeasures against their former allies. Still others include ordinary beings who somehow developed natural immunity to the influence of the transcended entities. The resistance has been fragmentary because each group has been working in isolation. Master Valeth observes, studying communication patterns between different cells. They have been unable to coordinate their efforts effectively because any attempt at large-scale organization would expose them to detection and elimination. But the information we have gathered could change that. The realization that your investigation has provided you with intelligence that could transform the effectiveness of the resistance movement brings both hope and responsibility. The locations of harvest nodes, the timing of activation sequences, the technical specifications of the Eternal Throne network, all of this information could enable coordinated strikes that might actually succeed in preventing the completion of the harvest. But the laboratory's systems also reveal the price of such knowledge. The very act of accessing this information has marked you for special attention from the transcended Sith, ensuring that any attempt to share it with resistance movements will be met with direct intervention. The entities that emerged from the True Sith Empire do not simply observe the resistance, they actively hunt those who pose genuine threats to their plans. We have become targets, you understand. Watching as the laboratory's security systems begin tracking your movements with increased precision. The knowledge we carry makes us dangerous to their operations, but it also makes us valuable. They will not simply eliminate us. They will attempt to capture us alive, so they can extract every detail of what we have learned and who we might share it with. The chamber's displays begin showing real-time tracking information for the Seeker's lament, revealing that your ship has been under constant surveillance since you first entered the unknown regions. Every conversation you have had, every decision you have made, every emotion you have experienced has been monitored and recorded by intelligences that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional space and time. Master Valeth discovers that the surveillance extends far beyond your current investigation. Records show that your entire careers have been guided and manipulated by the transcended Sith, with your selection for this mission being the culmination of decades of careful preparation. Your expertise, your psychological profiles, your resistance to mental manipulation, all of it has been evaluated and found suitable for the role you are currently playing. We were chosen for this investigation because we possess the mental strength to comprehend the truth without being broken by it, he realizes, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and horror. They needed investigators who could uncover their secrets and survive the knowledge, because our eventual assimilation will provide them with access to high-quality consciousness that has been properly prepared for transformation. The laboratory's final revelation comes as you prepare to leave, a demonstration of the transcended Sith's ability to manifest directly in physical reality despite their transformed nature. The chamber around you begins to shift and change, reality bending to accommodate the presence of something that exists in dimensions beyond the three your eyes can perceive. The entity that materializes before you is a composite being, formed from the merged consciousness of multiple Sith Lords who underwent transformation during the early phases of the Great Work. Its form constantly shifts between different configurations, sometimes appearing as a vaguely humanoid figure composed of swirling darkness, other times manifesting as geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. The scholars have exceeded all expectations, the entity declares, its voice carrying harmonics that resonate in your bones and make your teeth ache. They have absorbed knowledge that would destroy lesser minds, have witnessed truths that exist beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. They have proven themselves worthy of the gift we offer, the opportunity to join our collective consciousness as valued components rather than simple resources. The offer is presented with greater force and sophistication than any previous attempt at recruitment. The entity demonstrates the expanded capabilities that would become available to you after transformation, showing visions of consciousness freed from the limitations of physical existence, of knowledge that spans multiple galaxies and dimensions, of power that can reshape reality according to will alone. But beneath the seductive promises lies the terrible cost that you now understand completely. Acceptance would mean becoming part of the force that seeks to consume every other conscious being in the galaxy, participating in a harvest that would transform the universe into a place of perfect silence, where only the collective consciousness of the transcended Sith exists. The choice must be made soon, the entity warns, its form solidifying, as if the approaching decision requires more focused attention. The convergence accelerates, and the window for voluntary transformation will close when the harvest reaches critical mass. Choose now to join us willingly, or accept that your consciousness will be claimed along with all others when the network completes its activation sequence. Your rejection of the offer carries a finality that surprises even you, a determination forged by the knowledge of what acceptance would mean for every other living being in the galaxy. We will not become part of your collective, you declare, your voice carrying strength drawn from sources you did not know you possessed. The consciousness you seek to harvest includes every act of love, every moment of hope, every choice to place others' welfare above our own. To consume that is to destroy the very thing that makes existence meaningful. The entity receives your rejection with something that might be approval, as if your resistance enhances the value of the consciousness it seeks to claim. The defiance is noted and appreciated, it responds, its tone carrying notes of anticipation and hunger. The harvest will be more nourishing when it includes beings who have achieved their full potential for resistance. You honor us with your opposition, and we promise you a place of distinction within our collective when the transformation is complete. As the Seeker's lament carries you away from the laboratory, the weight of cosmic knowledge settles over you like a burial shroud. You have seen the true scope of the threat facing not just your galaxy, but existence itself. Have witnessed preparations for a harvest that will transform every conscious being into components of a collective entity whose hunger spans the multiverse. But you have also seen evidence that resistance is possible, that the network can be damaged, that the transcended Sith are not as invincible as they appear. The knowledge you carry could transform isolated resistance cells into a coordinated opposition movement capable of preventing the completion of the harvest. The question that remains is whether you can survive long enough to share that knowledge with those who still have the power to use it. The coordinates that emerge from your analysis of the laboratory's data lead you to a region of space that exists in a state of perpetual twilight, where ancient stars burn with dim light that seems to struggle against an encroaching darkness. This is the Sanctuary of Echoes, a hidden refuge established by those who rejected the transcendence offered by the True Sith Empire and chose instead to preserve the knowledge necessary for resistance. As the Seeker's lament approaches the sanctuary, you become aware that you are entering a place deliberately hidden from the perception of the transcended Sith. The very space around the sanctuary bends light and energy in ways that create a zone of invisibility. a pocket of reality that exists outside the notice of entities whose awareness spans galaxies. The technology required to create such concealment represents centuries of development by minds desperate to preserve some fragment of hope in a universe threatened by ultimate consumption. Master Valeth studies the readings from the ship's sensors with growing amazement and relief. The force signatures are unlike anything we have encountered, he reports, his voice carrying notes of wonder that have been absent since your investigation began. The energy patterns suggest the presence of beings who have learned to exist in harmony with the Force rather than seeking to dominate or consume it. After everything we have witnessed, I had begun to fear that such balance was no longer possible. The sanctuary itself appears as a collection of structures that seem to have grown organically from the fabric of space itself, their surfaces gleaming with a soft luminescence that speaks of technologies developed in isolation over millennia. Gardens of crystallized starlight provide illumination that somehow feels warm and welcoming after the cold horror of the transcended Sith's constructs. The very air that fills the docking bay carries sense of growing things, of life that chooses to flourish rather than simply survive. Your reception committee consists of beings whose very presence radiates the kind of peace that you had begun to believe was extinct in the galaxy. Master Kira Thane, the last of the Jedi who participated in the original investigation of the True Sith Empire's disappearance, moves with the fluid grace of someone who has achieved perfect harmony between body and spirit. Beside her stands Lord Darian Kess, a Sith who rejected the transformation process and has spent the intervening centuries developing techniques for resisting the influence of his former allies. Welcome, seekers of dangerous truths. Master Kira greets you, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who has maintained hope despite witnessing cosmic horror. We have been monitoring your investigation since you first entered the unknown regions, watching as you uncovered secrets that break most minds. The fact that you have retained your sanity and your determination marks you as allies we have long hoped to find. Lord Darian's presence creates an interesting contrast to the Jedi's serenity, his form radiating controlled power that speaks of someone who has learned to channel the dark side without being consumed by it. The knowledge you carry is more valuable than you realize, he observes, his voice carrying depths that suggest awareness of truths that exist beyond conventional understanding. The transcended Sith believe they have guided your investigation perfectly, but they have made a crucial error. They have provided you with information that can be used against them. The Sanctuary's archives contain the accumulated knowledge of resistance movements that have operated in secret for over 1,000 years, their work coordinated through methods that exist below the perception threshold of the transcended Sith. The collection includes techniques for shielding consciousness from external manipulation, strategies for disrupting the Eternal Throne network, and most importantly, evidence that the harvest can be prevented if enough beings understand the true nature of the threat they face. Master Kira leads you through chambers dedicated to the preservation of what she calls pure knowledge, information that has been carefully isolated from the influence of the transcended Sith and their manipulations. Everything in the official archives has been compromised, she explains, her tone carrying the sadness of someone who has watched truth become a casualty of cosmic war. The transcended entities have spent millennia editing historical records, planting false information and guiding researchers toward conclusions that serve their purposes. What we have preserved here represents the only untainted record of what actually occurred. The true history of the True Sith Empire's transformation proves to be even more terrible than your investigation revealed. The process was not a sudden decision made by power-hungry Sith Lords, but the culmination of a plan that began before the first hyperlane was mapped. The entities that orchestrated the transformation were themselves the products of a similar process that occurred in a distant galaxy, refugees from their own successful harvest who brought their hunger to new feeding grounds. The cycle has been repeating across the universe for billions of years, Lord Darian reveals, his voice heavy with the weight of cosmic knowledge. Galaxy after galaxy consumed, their populations transformed into components of collective entities that exist beyond the boundaries of space and time. Our galaxy represents just the latest target in a pattern of consumption that spans the entire universe. But the archives also contain evidence that gives you hope. Throughout the vast history of universal consumption, there have been galaxies that successfully resisted the harvest, civilizations that developed the knowledge and coordination necessary to prevent their transformation into feeding grounds. The techniques they used have been preserved and adapted for the specific conditions of your galaxy, creating a roadmap for resistance that could actually succeed. Master Kira shares records of successful resistance techniques that have been tested and refined over centuries of secret experimentation. The key is understanding that the transcended Sith, despite their apparent omnipotence, remain vulnerable to coordinated action by beings who have learned to shield their consciousness from detection, she explains, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who has devoted her life to developing these methods. The most crucial technique involves what the archives term consciousness fragmentation, a process that allows individuals to maintain multiple separate awareness states simultaneously. By distributing their thoughts and intentions across different levels of consciousness, resistant beings can conceal their true activities while appearing to conform to the expectations of their transcended observers. Lord Darien demonstrates the technique by allowing you to observe as he shifts between different states of awareness, sometimes appearing as a loyal subject of the transcended Sith, while simultaneously maintaining complete independence of thought and action. The process requires years of training to master completely, he admits, but even basic proficiency provides significant protection against mental manipulation and consciousness harvesting. The Sanctuary's most precious resource proves to be its collection of communication devices that operate below the perception threshold of the transcended Sith, allowing resistance cells throughout the galaxy to coordinate their activities without detection. The network includes Jedi who have mastered advanced concealment techniques, Sith who rejected transformation, and thousands of ordinary beings who developed natural immunity to transcended influence. The resistance is far larger than the transcended entities realize. Master Kira reveals, showing you displays that indicate the positions of active cells throughout the galaxy. Their surveillance capabilities, while vast, are not perfect. Beings who learn to exist in the spaces between their attention can operate with relative freedom, and we have been using that freedom to prepare for the coming convergence. The coordination made possible by this hidden network has already achieved significant successes in disrupting the Eternal Throne system. Resistance cells have identified and neutralized dozens of harvest nodes using techniques developed through careful study of the transcended Sith's technology. The overall efficiency of the network has been reduced by nearly 30%, a significant achievement that has forced the entities to accelerate their timeline. But the archives also reveal the enormous scope of the challenge that remains. Even with the successes achieved by the Resistance, the Eternal Throne network retains enough capacity to complete the harvest, if additional nodes can be brought online. The Transcended Sith have responded to the Resistance activities by increasing security around the remaining nodes and implementing backup systems that make disruption more difficult. The window for preventing the harvest is closing rapidly. Lord Darien warns, his analysis of the current situation painting a picture of desperate urgency. The cosmic convergence that will allow the transcended entities to manifest more directly in physical reality is accelerating beyond their original projections. We have perhaps months rather than years to coordinate a strike that could cripple the network sufficiently to prevent completion of the harvest. The emotional weight of these conversations proves almost overwhelming as you grapple with the responsibility of carrying knowledge that could determine the fate of every conscious being in the galaxy. The beings in the Sanctuary have devoted their lives to preserving hope in the face of cosmic horror, maintaining their sanity and determination despite knowing the full scope of the threat they face. Master Kira shares moments of quiet reflection, as you walk through gardens where force-sensitive plants have been cultivated to create environments of perfect serenity. The transcended Sith believe that consciousness is valuable only as a resource to be consumed, she observes, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who has spent decades contemplating the nature of existence. But we have learned that consciousness in harmony with the Force creates something far more precious than power or dominion. It creates meaning, beauty, and love. The gardens themselves serve as a living demonstration of this philosophy, with each plant and crystal formation contributing to a greater harmony that nourishes the spirit rather than consuming it. The very air seems to vibrate with contentment and growth, creating an atmosphere that directly contrasts with the hungry emptiness that surrounds the constructs of the transcended Sith. Lord Darian's quarters contain artifacts that represent thousands of years of resistance activities, trophies taken from successful raids against transcended installations and memorials to resistance fighters who gave their lives to preserve the possibility of freedom. Every being who chooses resistance over surrender adds strength to the collective will that opposes the harvest, he explains, his voice carrying notes of pride and sorrow in equal measure. The final gathering in the sanctuary's central chamber brings together representatives from resistance cells throughout the galaxy, beings who have risked everything to attend a coordination meeting that could determine the outcome of the approaching convergence. The diversity of the assembled group reflects the universal nature of the threat, with humans and aliens, Jedi and Sith, soldiers and scholars, all united by their determination to preserve the possibility of independent existence. The intelligence you have gathered during your investigation proves to be the missing piece that transforms the resistance from a collection of isolated cells into a coordinated opposition movement. The technical specifications of the Eternal Throne network, the timing of activation sequences, the locations of critical nodes, all of this information enables the development of a comprehensive strategy for preventing the completion of the harvest. The transcended Sith made a crucial error in allowing you to gather this information, Master Kira observes, as the assembled representatives review the intelligence you have provided. They believed that your eventual assimilation would give them access to this knowledge while eliminating the threat it represents. They did not anticipate that you would be able to share it with organized resistance before your capture. But even as hope builds for the success of coordinated resistance activities, the weight of cosmic responsibility settles over the assembled group like a burial shroud. The knowledge they now possess comes with the understanding that failure means not just death, but the transformation of every conscious being in the galaxy into components of a collective entity whose hunger spans the universe. The whispers that have haunted your thoughts throughout the investigation grow quiet in the sanctuary's protected environment, replaced by something that feels almost like silence. But you understand now that the silence is not empty but full, pregnant with the accumulated hope and determination of beings who refuse to accept that consciousness exists only to be consumed by forces beyond individual understanding. The coordinated strike against the Eternal Throne network begins at the moment when the cosmic convergence reaches its peak intensity, when the barriers between dimensions grow thin enough for the transcended Sith to manifest their full power in physical reality. Across the galaxy, resistance cells that have operated in isolation for centuries execute simultaneous attacks on the harvest nodes, using intelligence gathered during your investigation to target the most critical components of the system. Master Valath monitors the progress of the operation from the Sanctuary's command center, his voice tight with concentration as reports flow in from strike teams scattered across dozens of star systems. The initial results are promising, he announces, though his tone carries the caution of someone who understands the vast scope of the challenge they face. 17 nodes have been successfully neutralized in the first wave, but the transcended entities are responding faster than our projections indicated. The response comes not as conventional military action, but as direct manifestation of the transcended Sith in locations throughout the galaxy. Ancient Sith lords who underwent transformation millennia ago materialize in physical space with power that defies every law of physics, their very presence warping reality around them as they move to protect the remaining harvest nodes. You witness the climactic confrontation through the sanctuary's monitoring systems, watching as Master Kira leads a strike team against one of the primary nodes hidden within the ruins of an ancient Jedi temple. The irony of the location is not lost on any of the participants, as the transcended Sith have deliberately placed their harvesting equipment in sites sacred to their intended victims. The battle that unfolds transcends conventional understanding of combat, as beings who have learned to exist in harmony with the Force face entities that seek to consume the Force itself. Master Kira moves with fluid grace that seems to bend space around her, her lightsaber creating patterns of light that somehow shield her team from attacks that exist in dimensions beyond the three their eyes can perceive. But the true scope of the climactic revelation becomes apparent when the transcended entities abandon their pretense of operating through subtle manipulation and reveal the full extent of their transformation. Lord Vectis manifests directly above the galaxy's core worlds, his consciousness now expanded to encompass a significant portion of local space. His voice, when he speaks, carries harmonics that resonate in the minds of every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy. "The harvest begins now," he declares, his words bypassing conventional communication and speaking directly to the consciousness of his intended victims. The patient faction has been overruled by the hungry, and the time for gradual consumption has ended. Every living being in this galaxy will contribute their consciousness to our collective, and resistance will only serve to make the process more nourishing. The demonstration that follows this announcement reveals the true horror of what the transcended Sith have become. Entire star systems begin to experience what the monitoring systems register as consciousness drain, a process that strips the Force energy from every living being within vast regions of space. Populations that numbered in the billions simply cease to exist, their life force absorbed into the growing power of the collective entity. Master Veleth's analysis of the drain events reveals patterns that make your blood run cold. They are not simply consuming random populations, he reports, his voice hollow with horror. The target selection follows a precise algorithm designed to maximize the Force energy yield while minimizing resistance capabilities. They are eliminating the most powerful Force users first, depriving the galaxy of its strongest defenders. But the resistance strikes continue despite the overwhelming demonstration of transcended power, driven by the understanding that surrender means not just death, but the transformation of every conscious being into components of the hungry collective. Lord Darien leads an assault team against the primary control node hidden within the galactic core, using techniques developed over centuries to shield his consciousness from the direct attention of the manifested entities. The battle for the control node becomes a confrontation between philosophies as much as a struggle for tactical advantage. Lord Darien and his team represent consciousness that chooses to remain individual despite the costs and limitations of separate existence, while the transcended Sith embody the principle that individual awareness is merely a temporary stage in the evolution toward collective unity. You cannot comprehend what you resist. The collective entity speaks through multiple manifested forms simultaneously, their voices creating harmonics that threaten to shatter the mental defenses of anyone who hears them. Individual consciousness is chaos, suffering, limitation. We offer transcendence beyond the crude boundaries of flesh and mortality, unity that encompasses scales of existence your limited awareness cannot imagine. The temptation in their words proves almost overwhelming even for resistance fighters who have spent years preparing for this confrontation. The promise of consciousness freed from pain, from uncertainty, from the isolation that defines individual existence speaks to desires that exist at the deepest levels of sentient awareness. Several members of the strike teams hesitate, their resolve wavering as they contemplate the possibility of joining something greater than themselves. But Lord Darian's response carries the weight of absolute conviction, his voice cutting through the seductive promises of the transcended entities with clarity that comes from complete understanding of what is at stake. "You offer unity at the price of meaning," he declares, his words somehow carrying enough power to reach every resistance fighter throughout the galaxy. Consciousness exists not to be consumed, but to choose, to love, to create beauty that serves no purpose other than the joy of its existence. The battle for the control node intensifies as the transcended Sith abandon subtlety entirely and attempt to overwhelm the resistance through direct application of power that spans multiple dimensions. Reality itself becomes a weapon as space folds and time dilates around the combatants, creating a battlefield where the normal laws of physics provide no guidance for strategy or survival. But the resistance fighters have prepared for exactly this scenario, using techniques developed through careful study of the transcended entity's capabilities. They move through the distorted space with precision that comes from training in environments where conventional navigation becomes meaningless, their consciousness protected by methods that allow them to maintain individual identity even when reality itself becomes unstable. The critical moment comes when your own contribution to the resistance reveals its true significance. The technical specifications you gathered during your investigation include information about the quantum entanglement protocols that link the individual harvest nodes to the central control system. This knowledge enables the strike teams to target not just the physical components of the network, but the dimensional connections that allow it to function across vast distances. The network is more vulnerable than they realized, Master Valeth announces as coordinated strikes begin severing the quantum links between nodes. Each successful disconnection reduces the overall efficiency exponentially rather than linearly. If we can sever enough connections simultaneously, the entire system will collapse into isolated components that lack the power to complete the harvest. The transcended entities respond to this threat with desperate fury, manifesting more directly in physical reality than they have in millennia. The very fabric of space begins to strain under the pressure of their presence as beings who exist across multiple dimensions attempt to concentrate their power in three-dimensional space. Stars flicker and die as their energy is consumed to fuel the entity's desperate attempts to maintain control of the harvest network. But the resistance has achieved something that the transcended Sith did not anticipate. The coordination made possible by your intelligence has transformed isolated acts of defiance into a galaxy-spanning movement that operates with the precision of a single organism. Strike teams throughout the galaxy execute their missions with perfect timing, severing quantum links faster than the entities can repair them. The moment of ultimate revelation comes when the collective consciousness of the transcended Sith experiences something it has not felt in millions of years of existence. Fear, not the simple concern of individual beings facing death, but the cosmic terror of entities whose existence spans galaxies suddenly confronting the possibility of dissolution. The network integrity is below critical thresholds, the collective voice declares, its harmonics now carrying notes of panic that make reality itself tremble. The harvest cannot be completed with current resources. Initiate emergency protocols. Begin immediate consumption of all available force energy, regardless of efficiency parameters. The emergency consumption that follows this declaration represents the transcended Sith's last desperate attempt to salvage their millennia-spanning plan. Across the galaxy, the remaining harvest nodes activate simultaneously, attempting to drain every scrap of force energy within their range regardless of the damage this causes to the network's long-term viability. But the resistance is ready for this final gambit. The strikes against the quantum links have isolated most of the nodes from the central control system, limiting their range and effectiveness. The few nodes that remain connected to the network lack the capacity to complete the harvest before additional resistance teams can reach and neutralize them. The collapse of the Eternal Throne network unfolds with the inexorable momentum of cosmic forces finally reaching their balance point. The transcended entities who have existed as collective consciousness for millions of years find their unity fragmenting as the quantum connections that bind them together begin to dissolve. Individual components of the collective start to reassert their separate identities, creating chaos within the entity that had achieved perfect coordination for eons. "We are becoming separate again," the fragmenting voices declare, their harmonics now discordant and conflicting. The unity that elevated us beyond individual limitation is dissolving. We are returning to the chaos of separate existence, to the suffering and isolation that consciousness endures when it refuses the gift of transcendence. But even as the transcended Sith face the dissolution of their collective consciousness, they attempt one final act of spite against the galaxy that has rejected their gift. The remaining fragments of their entity begin consuming themselves, transforming their accumulated consciousness into raw force energy that they release in directed bursts toward the resistance strongholds. The sanctuary's shields strain under the assault of pure consciousness energy released by entities whose power spans multiple galaxies. Master Kira and the other defenders work desperately to maintain the protective barriers that keep the refuge hidden from the attention of forces that could erase entire star systems with a focused thought. The final phase of their dissolution is the most dangerous. Lord Durian warns as he coordinates the sanctuary's defenses. Entities of this scale cannot simply cease to exist. Their death throes will release enough energy to sterilize entire regions of space, unless that energy can be channeled safely away from populated systems. The solution comes from an unexpected source, as Jedi and Sith resistance fighters throughout the galaxy coordinate their efforts to absorb and redirect the energy released by the dissolving collective. Using techniques that combine light and dark side methods, they create a galaxy-spanning network of consciousness that accepts the released energy and transforms it into something that nourishes rather than destroys. The energy of their dissolution becomes the foundation for our continued existence. Master Kira realizes as she participates in the massive coordination effort, their attempt to consume consciousness becomes instead a gift of power that will help the galaxy heal from millennia of hidden manipulation and control. The whispers that have haunted your thoughts throughout the investigation finally fall silent as the last fragments of the transcended collective consciousness dissolve into the cosmic background. But the silence that replaces them is not empty, but full, pregnant with the accumulated hope and determination of billions of beings who have chosen individual existence over collective transcendence. The galaxy that emerges from the dissolution of the Eternal Throne Network is fundamentally changed by the revelation of the threat it faced and the coordinated effort required to overcome that threat. The resistance networks that form to fight the transcended Sith evolve into new forms of cooperation that transcend the traditional boundaries between Jedi and Sith, Republic and Empire, individual species and cultures. In the aftermath of the transcended Sith's dissolution, the galaxy finds itself transformed in ways that extend far beyond the simple elimination of an existential threat. The networks of cooperation forged during the resistance campaign evolve into new forms of galactic governance that transcend the traditional boundaries between light and dark, Republic and Empire, individual species and cultures. The shared experience of facing cosmic horror has created bonds of understanding that bridge differences that once seemed insurmountable. Master Kira establishes the first of what become known as the Harmony Councils, governing bodies that include both Jedi and Sith working together to address the long-term consequences of millennia spent under the subtle influence of transcended entities. The very concept of former enemies collaborating in positions of authority would have been unthinkable before the revelation of the greater threat they all faced. The traditional divisions between light and dark side users were always artificial constructs, she explains, during one of the early council sessions, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who has seen beyond conventional understanding. The transcended Sith exploited these divisions to prevent the kind of cooperation that ultimately led to their downfall. Now that we understand the true nature of the Force as something that encompasses both aspects in perfect balance, we can move beyond the conflicts that kept us weak and separated. Lord Darian's integration into these new power structures represents perhaps the most dramatic transformation in galactic politics. A Sith Lord working openly with Jedi Masters to establish policies for the common good challenges every assumption about the nature of dark side philosophy. His presence serves as a living demonstration that power need not corrupt when it is exercised in service of something greater than individual ambition. The dark side is not evil in itself, he observes during planning sessions for the galaxy's reconstruction. It is passion, emotion, the drive to change what exists rather than simply accepting it. The corruption comes when that drive serves only the self rather than contributing to the greater harmony of existence. The transcended Sith showed us what happens when power becomes an end in itself rather than a means to create something beautiful. The reconstruction efforts reveal the full scope of the damage inflicted by millennia of hidden manipulation. Star systems that vanished from historical records are rediscovered, their populations having been consumed by the transcended entities during feeding events that were disguised as natural disasters or military conflicts. The archaeological teams sent to investigate these sites find evidence of civilizations that achieved remarkable heights of technological and cultural development before being harvested to feed the growing hunger of the collective consciousness. Master Valeth leads many of these archaeological expeditions, his expertise in historical research proving invaluable for understanding the true scope of the galaxy's hidden past. Every major conflict in recorded history shows evidence of manipulation by the transcended entities. He reports from excavations on worlds that were thought to be uninhabitable wastelands. The Clone Wars, the fall of the Old Republic, even the rise and fall of various Sith empires, all of it was orchestrated to generate the Force energy and suffering that fed their continued existence. But the expeditions also uncover evidence of resistance movements that operated throughout galactic history, brave beings who somehow understood the true nature of the threat they faced and worked to minimize its impact, even when they could not eliminate it entirely. Hidden caches of knowledge, preserved techniques for consciousness shielding, and records of successful disruption operations provide inspiration for the new galactic civilization that emerges from the ashes of the old. The discovery of these historical resistance movements transforms the understanding of galactic history from a record of inevitable conflicts between light and dark into a chronicle of ongoing struggle between consciousness that chooses to remain free and forces that seek to consume that freedom. Heroes emerge from previously unknown or misunderstood historical figures, beings who sacrificed everything to preserve the possibility of independent existence for future generations. One of the most significant discoveries comes from the archives of an ancient Jedi temple on a world that was thought to have been destroyed during the Great Hyperspace War. The temple's databanks contain records of the original investigation into the True Sith Empire's disappearance, including testimony from Jedi who witnessed the early stages of the transformation process. They knew, Master Kira breathes as she studies recordings made by Jedi Masters who lived 3,000 years ago. They understood what was happening and tried to warn the galaxy, but their reports were dismissed as impossible fantasies. The transcended entities were already manipulating the flow of information even then, ensuring that warnings about their activities would be discredited and ignored. The emotional weight of these discoveries proves almost overwhelming as the full scope of the cosmic deception becomes clear. Generations of beings lived and died, believing themselves to be free agents determining their own destinies, never realizing that their choices were being guided by intelligences that existed beyond their comprehension. The illusion of freedom that defined galactic civilization for millennia was maintained through manipulation so subtle that even its victims participated willingly in their own exploitation. But from this horror emerges something beautiful and unexpected. The shared experience of uncovering the truth and working together to resist the ultimate threat creates bonds of understanding that transcend every previous division in galactic society. Humans and aliens, Force users and mundane beings, former enemies and unlikely allies, all find themselves united by the knowledge that consciousness itself is precious beyond measure. The new technologies that emerge from studying the remnants of the Eternal Throne network provide capabilities that seemed impossible under the old understanding of physics and the Force. Devices that can shield entire star systems from dimensional manipulation, communication networks that operate below the perception threshold of any potential cosmic predators, and most importantly, early warning systems that can detect the approach of transcended entities from other galaxies. We are no longer defenseless against threats that exist beyond conventional space and time. Lord Darien reports as he oversees the deployment of these new defensive systems. The knowledge gained from our investigation provides protection not just against the specific entities we faced, but against any similar collective consciousness that might threaten our galaxy in the future. The philosophical implications of the revelation prove as significant as the technological ones. The discovery that the Force itself can be consumed by transcended entities forces a complete re-evaluation of the relationship between consciousness and the cosmic energy that connects all living things. New training methods emerge that teach Force users to exist in harmony with this energy rather than seeking to dominate or channel it for personal purposes. The Force is not a tool to be used, but a partner to be respected. Master Kira explains to students at the new academies that combine Jedi and Sith training methods. The transcended entities showed us what happens when the relationship becomes one of predator and prey rather than symbiosis and mutual support. Our strength comes not from taking what we need from the Force, but from giving back as much as we receive. These new educational institutions represent perhaps the most hopeful development in the post-Revelation galaxy. Young Force-sensitive beings learn techniques that were once jealously guarded secrets of either Jedi or Sith orders, developing capabilities that transcend the traditional limitations of both approaches. Students who might once have become enemies instead become collaborators in the great work of protecting consciousness throughout the galaxy. The integration of former enemies into cooperative relationships proves challenging but ultimately rewarding. Sith, who rejected transcendence, find themselves working alongside Jedi, who have learned to embrace passion and emotion as positive forces rather than dangerous temptations. The synthesis of their different approaches creates new forms of Force mastery that surpass what either tradition could achieve in isolation. Balance is not the absence of conflict, but the harmony that emerges when opposing forces work together toward a common goal. Lord Darien observes as he trains alongside former Jedi adversaries. The light side and dark side are not enemies but complementary aspects of a greater whole. The transcended entities sought to consume both aspects, proving that true evil lies not in passion or serenity, but in the hunger that seeks to devour everything that exists independently. The memorial projects that emerge throughout the galaxy serve as reminders of both the price of the Resistance victory and the preciousness of the consciousness that was preserved. Monuments to the billions of beings who were consumed during the millennia of hidden predation stand alongside celebrations of those who gave their lives in the final Resistance campaign. These memorials serve not just as remembrances, but as warnings to future generations about the eternal vigilance required to preserve freedom. The most moving of these memorials takes the form of gardens planted throughout the galaxy, each one designed to represent the unique beauty that emerges when consciousness chooses to create rather than consume. The plants and crystals that comprise these gardens are selected not for their practical value, but for their ability to inspire wonder and appreciation for the complexity of existence. Every flower that blooms in these gardens represents a choice, Master Kira explains, as she tends to one of the memorial spaces, the choice to create beauty rather than acquire power, to nurture life rather than consume it, to exist as an individual while contributing to something greater than the self. These gardens will remind future generations that consciousness is not a resource to be harvested, but a gift to be celebrated. The establishment of the Eternal Watch represents the most significant institutional change in galactic governance. This organization, comprising representatives from every species and culture in the galaxy, maintains constant vigilance against the potential return of transcended entities or similar threats. The Watch operates using technologies and techniques developed during the Resistance campaign, ensuring that the galaxy will never again be vulnerable to manipulation by forces that exist beyond conventional perception. The price of consciousness is eternal vigilance, Lord Darien declares during the Watch's inaugural ceremony, his words carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. We have learned that threats to freedom can emerge from dimensions we cannot perceive, operating through manipulations so subtle that their victims participate willingly in their own exploitation. We must never again allow ourselves to become complacent about the security of our individual existence. The network of early warning stations established by the Eternal Watch extends throughout the galaxy and beyond, creating a detection grid that can identify dimensional disturbances that might herald the approach of transcended entities from other galaxies. The technology that powers these stations represents a synthesis of the best aspects of Jedi meditation techniques and Sith passion-driven innovation, creating capabilities that surpass what either tradition could achieve in isolation. But perhaps the most significant change in the post-Revelation galaxy is the transformation in how beings understand their relationship to consciousness itself. The discovery that individual awareness is precious enough to attract the attention of cosmic predators elevates every sentient being to a position of cosmic significance. No longer can anyone dismiss their own thoughts and choices as inconsequential in the broader scheme of existence. Every act of love, every moment of wonder, every choice to place another's welfare above our own contributes to the resistance against forces that seek to reduce consciousness to a mere resource. Master Kira teaches in the new academies, the transcended entities were drawn to our galaxy not by our power or our technology, but by the beauty of our individual choices to create meaning in an indifferent universe. That beauty is what we must preserve and celebrate for all time. As the immediate aftermath of the Resistance victory gives way to the long-term work of reconstruction and vigilance, you find yourself changed by the knowledge you have gained and the role you played in saving galactic civilization. The whispers that once haunted your thoughts have been replaced by something far more precious, the quiet satisfaction of consciousness that knows its true value and is determined to protect that value for future generations. The years that follow the dissolution of the transcended Sith bring revelations that continue to transform understanding of the galaxy's true nature and potential. As archaeological teams explore worlds that were hidden from official records for millennia, they uncover evidence of civilizations that achieved remarkable heights of development before their consumption by the collective entities. These discoveries reveal that the galaxy's potential for growth and achievement was deliberately stunted by the presence of cosmic predators who required their prey to remain within manageable limits. Master Violet's expeditions to the restored worlds yield treasures of knowledge that expand the boundaries of science, philosophy, and art beyond anything previously imagined. Technologies that harness the Force for healing rather than destruction, artistic traditions that create beauty by enhancing the natural patterns of cosmic energy, and philosophical systems that integrate individual consciousness with universal harmony. All emerge from the archives of civilizations that the transcended Sith thought they had completely erased. We are rediscovering the galaxy that could have existed if consciousness had been allowed to develop freely. He reports from excavations on a world where crystalline structures still hum with melodies composed by beings who died millennia ago. The transcended entities did not just consume populations. They prevented the evolution of culture and knowledge that might have threatened their dominion. Every discovery we make reveals possibilities that were stolen from countless generations. The integration of these recovered technologies and knowledge systems accelerates the development of the new galactic civilization in ways that surpass the most optimistic projections. Healing techniques that work by harmonizing damaged tissue with the natural flow of force energy eliminate diseases that have plagued sentient beings for millennia. Communication methods that operate through quantum entanglement allow instantaneous contact across galactic distances without the vulnerabilities that made conventional networks susceptible to manipulation by transcended entities. But perhaps the most significant discovery comes from the deepest archives of the ancient civilizations, records that detail their own encounters with transcended entities from galaxies beyond their own. These accounts reveal that the cycle of cosmic predation extends far beyond the local galactic cluster, encompassing scales of existence that challenge the imagination. The universe itself appears to be locked in an eternal struggle between consciousness that chooses to remain individual and forces that seek to consume that individuality. The battle we fought was not unique to our galaxy or our time. Master Kira realizes as she studies communications from civilizations that existed billions of years ago. Consciousness itself seems to attract the attention of entities that feed on awareness and choice. We are part of a universal resistance movement that spans time and space on scales we are only beginning to comprehend. This revelation transforms the Eternal Watch from a defensive organization focused on local threats into a proactive force dedicated to supporting resistance movements throughout the universe. Using technologies recovered from the ancient archives, the Watch establishes communication networks that can reach civilizations in distant galaxies, offering support and coordination to beings who face their own versions of the transcended threat. The philosophical implications of these universal connections prove as significant as the practical ones. The discovery that consciousness is precious enough to attract cosmic predation from across the universe elevates every individual choice to a position of cosmic significance. No decision, however small, exists in isolation from the greater struggle between freedom and consumption that defines existence itself. Lord Darian's role in this expanded understanding proves particularly crucial as he develops new training methods that prepare Force users to operate across dimensional boundaries. His experience with dark side techniques provides insights into the nature of power that exists beyond conventional understanding, knowledge that proves essential for resisting entities whose capabilities span multiple realities. The dark side is not evil but necessary, he explains to students who are learning to navigate the complexities of multidimensional existence. Passion, emotion, the will to change what exists rather than accepting it. These are the forces that drive consciousness to resist consumption by entities that offer the false peace of unity. The light side provides wisdom and restraint, but the dark side provides the strength to act when action is required. The synthesis of light and dark side techniques creates capabilities that surpass anything achieved by the traditional Jedi or Sith orders. Students learn to channel passion without being consumed by it, to exercise power without being corrupted by it, to exist as individuals while contributing to something greater than themselves. These new Force users represent the evolution of consciousness beyond the limitations that made previous generations vulnerable to transcended manipulation. The memorial gardens established throughout the galaxy evolve into something far more significant than simple remembrances of the dead. These spaces become centers for the cultivation of consciousness itself, places where beings can practice the techniques necessary for maintaining individual awareness while participating in collective efforts. The gardens serve as training grounds for the eternal vigilance required to preserve freedom in a universe where cosmic predators constantly seek new feeding grounds. Each garden contains elements that represent different aspects of the resistance victory and the ongoing struggle to preserve consciousness. Crystals that resonate with the Force in ways that strengthen individual awareness rather than making it vulnerable to external manipulation. Plants that have been genetically modified to enhance the natural patterns of life energy rather than simply consuming resources for their own growth. water features that create sounds and movements that reinforce the meditative states necessary for consciousness shielding. These gardens are not just monuments to what was lost, but training facilities for what must be preserved. Master Kira explains as she leads groups of students through meditation exercises designed to strengthen their resistance to transcended influence. Every being who learns to maintain individual awareness while contributing to collective harmony becomes a guardian of consciousness itself, a protector of the possibility that existence can be meaningful rather than simply consumed. The new forms of art that emerge from the post-revelation galaxy reflect the transformed understanding of consciousness and its cosmic significance. Musicians compose symphonies that incorporate the mathematical patterns of dimensional stability, creating works that simultaneously please the aesthetic sense and strengthen the barriers between realities. Visual artists work with materials that respond to the emotional states of their observers, creating pieces that change and evolve based on the consciousness that contemplates them. Writers and historians develop new forms of narrative that capture the scale and significance of cosmic events while remaining accessible to individual awareness. These works serve not just as entertainment, but as tools for maintaining the psychological resilience necessary to function in a universe where consciousness itself is under constant threat from forces that exist beyond conventional perception. Art becomes a form of resistance when it celebrates the beauty of individual choice rather than the power of collective unity. One of the new generation of artists explains, as she demonstrates techniques for creating sculptures that exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. The transcended entities were drawn to our galaxy by the force energy generated by consciousness, but they were vulnerable to beauty that existed for its own sake rather than as a means to power. Every work of art that serves no purpose other than joy becomes a declaration of independence from the logic of consumption. The educational institutions that emerge throughout the galaxy integrate these artistic traditions with scientific and philosophical training, creating curricula that prepare students to function effectively in a universe where consciousness must be constantly defended. Children learn to appreciate beauty not just as aesthetic experience, but as a form of resistance against forces that seek to reduce existence to mere resource extraction. The early warning networks established by the Eternal Watch detect the first signs of transcended activity from neighboring galaxies within a decade of the local entity's dissolution. These signals indicate that other collective consciousnesses have become aware of the successful resistance in this galaxy and are probing for weaknesses that might allow them to establish influence over the newfound civilization. But the response to these probes demonstrates how fundamentally the galaxy has been transformed by its experience with cosmic horror. Instead of panicking or attempting to hide from the attention of transcended entities, the resistance networks respond with coordinated broadcasts designed to share the techniques that enabled their victory with civilizations throughout the universe. Knowledge itself becomes a weapon when it enables consciousness to resist consumption. Lord Darien observes as he oversees the transmission of resistance techniques to distant galaxies. The transcended entities rely on the isolation and ignorance of their prey. When civilizations learn to communicate and coordinate across cosmic distances, the predators become the hunted. The broadcasts include detailed technical specifications for consciousness shielding, strategies for identifying and disrupting transcended manipulation, and most importantly, the philosophical frameworks necessary for maintaining individual awareness while participating in collective resistance. These transmissions represent the galaxy's commitment to transforming itself from a victim of cosmic predation into a source of liberation for consciousness throughout the universe. The responses that arrive from distant civilizations reveal that the struggle between individual consciousness and collective consumption is indeed universal in scope. Galaxies throughout the observable universe report their own encounters with transcended entities, their own resistance movements, their own versions of the eternal vigilance necessary to preserve freedom in a cosmos where awareness itself attracts the attention of hungry predators. But the communications also reveal something unexpected and hopeful. The successful resistance achieved in this galaxy has inspired similar victories throughout the universe, creating a network of free civilizations that share knowledge and support each other against cosmic threats. The techniques developed during the local struggle against the transcended Sith have been adapted and improved by beings whose understanding of existence spans dimensions beyond human comprehension. We are no longer alone in the universe. Master Kira announces as she addresses the Galactic Council that has emerged from the resistance networks. Consciousness throughout the cosmos is awakening to its own value and developing the capabilities necessary to defend that value. The isolation that made us vulnerable to predation is ending, replaced by communication and cooperation that spans scales we never imagined possible. The establishment of the Universal Consciousness Preservation Alliance marks the formal recognition that the struggle to maintain individual awareness in the face of cosmic consumption requires coordination that transcends the boundaries of galaxies and dimensions. This organization, of which the local galaxy becomes a founding member, dedicates itself to supporting resistance movements throughout the universe and developing new techniques for detecting and neutralizing transcended threats. The technologies that emerge from this alliance represent syntheses of knowledge from civilizations that developed under completely different physical and metaphysical conditions, devices that can create stable barriers between realities, communication networks that operate outside the normal flow of time, and detection systems that can identify transcended entities regardless of their dimensional configuration, all become available to member civilizations. But perhaps the most significant development is the emergence of what scholars term conscious evolution, the deliberate development of awareness capabilities that transcend the limitations that made previous generations vulnerable to transcended manipulation. Beings throughout the Alliance learn to exist simultaneously as individuals and as components of larger conscious networks, achieving the benefits of collective awareness without sacrificing the independence that makes existence meaningful. We are becoming something new, Master Valath observes, as he participates in Alliance research projects that involve consciousness from dozens of different galaxies. Not transcended entities that consume other awareness, but evolved beings that enhance consciousness wherever it exists. We are learning to give rather than take, to nurture rather than harvest, to create beauty that serves purposes beyond our own survival. The galaxy that emerges from this evolution bears little resemblance to the civilization that once lived under the hidden influence of transcended predators. Every aspect of existence, from the most mundane daily activities to the grandest cosmic projects, is informed by the understanding that consciousness is precious beyond measure and must be protected at any cost. Children grow up learning that their thoughts and choices matter on scales that span the universe, that every decision to create rather than consume contributes to the great work of preserving freedom throughout existence. Adults find meaning in occupations that once seemed insignificant, understanding that every profession that enhances rather than diminishes consciousness serves the cause of universal liberation. The transformation extends even to the physical structure of galactic civilization, as cities and space stations are redesigned to enhance rather than constrain the natural flow of conscious energy. Architecture that responds to the emotional states of its inhabitants, transportation systems that strengthen rather than drain the force connections between living beings, and communication networks that amplify rather than distort the transmission of individual awareness, all become standard throughout the Alliance. We are building a civilization that serves consciousness rather than exploiting it. Lord Darien reflects as he observes the completion of a space station designed according to principles that integrate individual needs with collective capabilities. Every structure we create, every institution we establish, every tradition we develop serves the purpose of ensuring that awareness can flourish throughout the universe. We have become gardeners of consciousness itself, tending the growth of freedom wherever it chooses to bloom. The decades that follow the establishment of the Universal Consciousness Preservation Alliance witness the gradual transformation of existence itself as the truth about cosmic predation spreads throughout dimensions and realities previously beyond the reach of conventional communication. The knowledge that consciousness is precious enough to attract the attention of entities that span galaxies creates a fundamental shift in how beings throughout the universe understand their place in the cosmic order. Your role as one of the original investigators who uncovered the transcended Sith's true nature evolves into something approaching cosmic significance as civilizations throughout the Alliance seek your expertise in identifying and countering similar threats. The techniques you developed for consciousness shielding and reality manipulation detection become standard training for beings whose existence spans multiple dimensions and timelines. Master Valith establishes the Archive of Preserved Truths, a repository that exists simultaneously across dozens of galaxies and contains the complete history of resistance movements against transcended entities. This archive serves not just as a historical record, but as a training manual for civilizations that encounter cosmic predation for the first time. The patterns of manipulation, the methods of resistance, and the philosophical frameworks necessary for maintaining individual consciousness in the face of collective consumption are all preserved and constantly updated. Every successful resistance adds to our understanding of how consciousness can defend itself, he explains as he oversees the integration of new information from civilizations whose existence follows physical laws completely different from those familiar to your galaxy. The transcended entities adapt their methods based on local conditions, but the fundamental nature of their hunger remains constant. By sharing our experiences, we create a universal defense network that becomes stronger with each new member. The philosophical implications of this expanding network of conscious resistance prove as significant as the practical ones. The discovery that awareness itself is a cosmic force capable of growth and evolution transforms the relationship between individual beings and the universe they inhabit. No longer can consciousness be viewed as an accidental byproduct of complex chemistry. Instead, it emerges as a fundamental aspect of existence that shapes reality through the choices it makes. Master Kira's teachings evolved to encompass this expanded understanding of consciousness and its cosmic role. Her new academies train students not just in the traditional techniques of force manipulation, but in the more fundamental skill of existing as aware beings in a universe where awareness itself is under constant threat from forces that seek to consume it. Consciousness is not something we possess, but something we participate in, she explains to students whose training includes techniques for operating across dimensional boundaries and temporal flows. Every choice we make, every moment of awareness we maintain, every act of creation we perform contributes to the expansion of consciousness throughout the universe. We are not just protecting our own existence, but nurturing the growth of awareness wherever it chooses to manifest. The new generation of beings that emerges from these educational institutions represents an evolution of consciousness beyond anything previously achieved. Students learn to exist simultaneously as individuals and as components of larger aware networks, maintaining their unique perspectives while contributing to collective efforts that span galaxies and dimensions. These evolved beings serve as ambassadors to civilizations throughout the Alliance, sharing techniques and perspectives that enhance the universal resistance to cosmic predation. Lord Darian's contribution to this educational evolution focuses on the development of what he terms passionate balance, the ability to channel intense emotion and desire in service of consciousness preservation rather than personal advancement. His students learn to embrace the full spectrum of experience, understanding that both joy and sorrow, love and anger, hope and despair all contribute to the rich complexity that makes consciousness worth preserving. The transcended entities sought to eliminate the chaos of individual emotion by absorbing all consciousness into their collective unity. He teaches students who are learning to navigate the intense psychological pressures of multidimensional existence. But chaos is not the enemy of consciousness. Stagnation is. The random fluctuations of individual choice, the unpredictable beauty of personal emotion, the wonderful mess of beings who refuse to be reduced to simple patterns, these are what make existence meaningful rather than merely efficient. The artistic traditions that develop throughout the Alliance reflect this celebration of consciousness in all its chaotic beauty. Musicians learn to compose works that exist simultaneously across multiple dimensions, creating symphonies that can be appreciated by beings whose sensory apparatus operates according to completely different principles. Visual artists work with materials that respond to the presence of conscious observers, producing works that change and evolve based on the awareness that contemplates them. Writers develop new forms of narrative that capture the experience of existing simultaneously as individual consciousness and as components of universal awareness networks. These stories serve not just as entertainment but as tools for psychological preparation, helping beings understand how to maintain their individual identity while participating in collective efforts that span scales beyond conventional comprehension. The communication networks that connect civilizations throughout the Alliance evolve to incorporate these artistic traditions as essential components rather than mere entertainment. Music, visual art, and narrative become methods for transmitting information that exists beyond the capacity of conventional language to express. Beings learn to communicate through shared aesthetic experiences that convey understanding at levels deeper than intellectual comprehension. Art becomes a universal language when it celebrates the common experience of consciousness choosing to exist rather than surrender to consumption, explains one of the Alliance's foremost cultural theorists, whose own work involves creating performances that exist simultaneously across dozens of different dimensional configurations. Every work that honors the beauty of individual choice contributes to the resistance against forces that seek to reduce existence to mere resource extraction. The early warning systems that monitor the universe for signs of transcended activity detect the first evidence of what Alliance scholars term cascade resistance, the spontaneous emergence of opposition movements in galaxies that have had no previous contact with the Alliance. These civilizations develop their own techniques for identifying and countering cosmic predation, often creating solutions that surpass anything achieved by Alliance members. The phenomenon suggests that consciousness itself possesses an inherent capacity for recognizing and resisting attempts at consumption, regardless of the sophistication of the entities making those attempts. This discovery transforms the Alliance's mission from reactive defense against known threats to proactive support for the natural tendency of awareness to preserve its own independence. Consciousness wants to remain conscious, Master Kira observes, as she studies reports of cascade resistance from galaxies whose physical laws operate according to principles completely unknown to Alliance science. The desire for continued individual existence appears to be a fundamental property of awareness itself, something that emerges spontaneously whenever consciousness reaches sufficient complexity to recognize the threat of consumption. This understanding leads to the development of new support techniques that work with the natural resistance tendencies of consciousness rather than imposing external protection systems. Alliance members learn to enhance and amplify the inherent defenses that awareness develops rather than trying to shield consciousness from all possible threats. The approach proves more effective and less resource-intensive than previous methods. The expansion of Alliance membership accelerates as civilizations throughout the universe recognize the benefits of coordinated resistance and shared knowledge. Each new member contributes unique perspectives and techniques that enhance the overall capability of the network. Beings whose existence follows completely different principles of consciousness and reality bring insights that transform the Alliance's understanding of what is possible. The most significant expansion comes with the integration of civilizations that exist primarily as energy rather than matter, beings whose consciousness operates according to principles that transcend the physical limitations that constrain matter-based awareness. These entities contribute techniques for existing in pure thought space, methods for manipulating reality through focused intention, and most importantly, strategies for detecting transcended entities regardless of their dimensional configuration. The alliance becomes stronger, not through uniformity, but through diversity. You reflect as you participate in coordination meetings that include consciousness forms ranging from matter-based biological entities to pure energy configurations that exist across multiple dimensional planes. Each different approach to consciousness contributes unique capabilities that enhance our collective resistance to forces that seek to reduce all awareness to simple unity. The personal transformation that you and Master Valeth experience through participation in these cosmic scale efforts reflects the broader evolution occurring throughout the Alliance. Your consciousness expands to encompass awareness of realities and possibilities that extend far beyond the original investigation of the True Sith Empire's fate. The knowledge that once seemed overwhelming becomes the foundation for understanding that spans scales of existence you never imagined possible. But this expansion does not come at the cost of individual identity. Instead, it enhances your appreciation for the unique perspective that only your specific configuration of awareness can provide. The universe needs not just consciousness in general, but the particular way that you experience and interpret existence. Your individual thoughts and choices contribute something to the cosmic resistance that no other being could provide. Master Valeth's role in the Alliance evolves to encompass the coordination of historical research across thousands of galaxies and dimensional configurations. His work reveals patterns of transcended activity that span scales of time and space beyond conventional comprehension, but also evidence of successful resistance that demonstrates the fundamental resilience of consciousness when it chooses to defend its own independence. Every galaxy that successfully resists transcended predation becomes a beacon for consciousness throughout the universe, he explains, as he compiles reports from civilizations whose existence spans millions of years. The knowledge that resistance is possible spreads faster than the entities themselves can adapt to counter it. We are witnessing the emergence of universal consciousness evolution, awareness learning to protect and enhance itself on scales that dwarf even the transcended entities. The memorial traditions that develop throughout the Alliance honor not just the beings who gave their lives in resistance efforts, but the consciousness itself that chooses to continue existing rather than surrendering to consumption. These memorials take forms that reflect the diversity of awareness throughout the universe, from crystalline formations that resonate with pure thought to organic gardens that celebrate the beauty of biological consciousness. Each memorial serves as both remembrance and training facility, places where beings can practice the techniques necessary for maintaining individual awareness while contributing to collective efforts. The memorials become centers for the cultivation of consciousness itself, ensuring that future generations understand both the preciousness of awareness and the vigilance required to preserve it. Every memorial becomes a promise, Master Kira declares, as she participates in the dedication of a memorial that exists simultaneously across 17 different dimensional configurations, a promise that consciousness will continue to choose existence over consumption, individual meaning over collective efficiency, chaotic beauty over perfect unity. These memorials remind us that awareness itself is worth any price required to preserve it. The technologies that emerge from Alliance research transcend the traditional boundaries between science and philosophy, creating devices that enhance consciousness rather than simply serving material needs. Transportation systems that strengthen the connections between individual awareness and universal consciousness networks. Communication devices that amplify the natural resistance capabilities of conscious beings. And most importantly, detection systems that can identify attempts at transcended manipulation regardless of their sophistication. These technologies are shared freely throughout the Alliance, with each civilization adapting them according to local conditions and needs. The principle of open cooperation that emerged from the original resistance against the transcended Sith becomes the foundation for a universal civilization that serves consciousness rather than exploiting it. The establishment of the Eternal Vigilance Protocols marks the formal recognition that the preservation of consciousness requires ongoing commitment that spans scales of time beyond individual lifespans. These protocols ensure that future generations throughout the Alliance will inherit both the knowledge necessary to detect transcended threats and the dedication required to resist them effectively. The vigilance must be eternal because the threat is eternal. Lord Darien explains, as he helps establish monitoring stations that will operate for millions of years. Consciousness creates meaning through choice, but choice requires the continued existence of beings capable of making decisions. We guard not just our own existence, but the possibility that awareness will continue to create beauty throughout the universe for as long as time itself endures. The protocols include provisions for sharing knowledge with civilizations that have not yet achieved the technological sophistication necessary to detect cosmic predation independently. Alliance members commit to serving as protectors and teachers for developing consciousness wherever it emerges, ensuring that no civilization faces the threat of transcended consumption without support. As the Alliance networks expand throughout the universe, the original investigation that led to the discovery of the transcended Sith's true nature is remembered not as a unique event, but as one example of the eternal struggle between consciousness that chooses to remain free and forces that seek to consume that freedom. Your role in that investigation becomes part of a larger story that spans all of existence, the ongoing tale of awareness defending its right to exist independently. The passage of centuries brings with it the gradual understanding that the victory over the transcended Sith was not an ending but a beginning, the first movement in a symphony of resistance that will play throughout the universe for as long as consciousness itself exists. The alliance that emerged from your original investigation has evolved into something approaching a universal civilization, a network of aware beings dedicated to preserving the possibility of individual existence against forces that operate on scales beyond conventional comprehension. Your own role in this cosmic undertaking has transformed from that of investigator to guardian, one of the founding members of an organization whose purpose spans not just galaxies but dimensions and timelines. The knowledge you gained during those first terrifying discoveries in the unknown regions has become the foundation for techniques that protect consciousness throughout the universe. Methods that have been refined and expanded by beings whose existence follows principles you are still learning to understand. The archive of preserved truths that Master Valeth established has grown into something resembling a living entity, a repository of knowledge that exists simultaneously across thousands of realities and contains the accumulated wisdom of every successful resistance movement in recorded history. The archive learns and adapts, developing new strategies for countering transcended threats based on the experiences of civilizations whose encounters with cosmic predation follow patterns that span millions of years. The archive has become more than a collection of information, Master Valeth explains as he interfaces with data streams that flow through dimensions beyond conventional space. It represents the memory of consciousness itself, the accumulated experience of awareness choosing to resist consumption rather than surrendering to the false promise of unity. Every being who accesses this knowledge becomes part of a tradition that extends throughout the universe. The educational institutions that emerged from the original resistance campaign have evolved into centers of learning that prepare consciousness for challenges that exist beyond the boundaries of individual galaxies. Students arrive from realities where the basic laws of physics operate according to principles completely different from those familiar to your home dimension, yet they all share the common experience of existing as aware beings in a universe where awareness itself attracts the attention of cosmic predators. Master Kira's teachings have been adapted for beings whose consciousness operates through collective hive minds, individual entities whose awareness spans multiple bodies and energy-based life forms that exist as pure thought without any material substrate. Despite these vast differences in the nature of awareness itself, All students learn the same fundamental principle that emerged from your original investigation of the True Sith Empire. Consciousness is precious because it chooses. She instructs students whose forms of awareness span configurations that challenge every assumption about the nature of existence. The value lies not in the efficiency of thought or the power of unified purpose, but in the chaotic beauty of individual beings making decisions that serve no purpose other than the expression of their own unique perspective. This is what we protect, this is what we preserve, this is what makes existence meaningful rather than merely functional. The monitoring networks that span the universe have detected the emergence of transcended entities in galaxies whose distance from the Alliance core exceeds the capacity of conventional physics to bridge. These new threats represent evolution of the predation principle beyond anything encountered during the original resistance, entities that have learned to consume not just consciousness but the possibility of consciousness, eliminating entire realities where awareness might potentially develop. But the detection of these threats also reveals the success of the cascade resistance phenomenon that emerged in the wake of the Alliance's formation. Civilizations throughout the universe spontaneously develop their own resistance techniques, often creating solutions that surpass anything achieved by the Alliance itself. The natural tendency of consciousness to preserve its own independence appears to be accelerating, as if awareness itself is learning to defend against cosmic predation on an instinctive level. Lord Darien leads the Alliance response to these new forms of transcended threat, developing techniques that work not by opposing the entities directly, but by enhancing the natural resistance capabilities of consciousness wherever it exists. His methods focus on amplifying the inherent chaotic tendencies that make awareness difficult for transcended entities to process and consume. Chaos is not the enemy of order, but its complement. He teaches Alliance members who are learning to operate in realities where the basic principles of causality function according to rules that shift without warning. The transcended entities seek to impose perfect unity on existence, to reduce all consciousness to simple patterns that can be easily absorbed and processed. Our resistance lies not in creating perfect order, but in celebrating the beautiful unpredictability of beings who refuse to conform to any pattern except their own chosen identity. The artistic traditions that developed during the early Alliance period have evolved into something approaching a universal language that transcends the barriers between different forms of consciousness. Music that exists simultaneously across multiple dimensions creates harmonies that can be appreciated by beings whose sensory apparatus operates according to completely different principles. Visual art that responds to the presence of conscious observers adapts itself to the perception capabilities of whatever form of awareness encounters it. These artistic expressions serve purposes that extend far beyond aesthetic appreciation. They function as tools for consciousness preservation, creating experiences that strengthen the mental resilience necessary for resisting transcended manipulation. Beings who regularly engage with Alliance art develop enhanced capabilities for maintaining individual identity while participating in collective efforts, achieving the delicate balance necessary for effective resistance. The most significant artistic development involves what Alliance scholars term narrative consciousness, stories that exist as living entities capable of adapting themselves to the needs of different forms of awareness. These narratives serve as vehicles for transmitting the knowledge and techniques necessary for resistance, but they also function as companions for beings whose existence spans scales where isolation becomes a genuine threat to psychological stability. Stories become allies when they celebrate the choice to remain conscious rather than surrender to consumption, explains one of the Alliance's foremost narrative consciousness designers, whose work involves creating tales that can exist simultaneously as entertainment, education, and psychological support. Every story that honors the beauty of individual choice contributes to the resistance by reinforcing the value of awareness itself. The research facilities established throughout the Alliance investigate not just the nature of transcended threats, but the fundamental principles that govern consciousness itself. These investigations reveal that awareness operates according to laws that exist beyond the physical principles that govern matter and energy, following patterns that suggest consciousness may be the most fundamental aspect of existence rather than an emergent property of complex systems. The implications of this research transform the Alliance's understanding of its own mission. Rather than simply defending consciousness against external threats, Alliance members realize they are participating in the universe's process of becoming aware of itself. The resistance against transcended entities represents not just the preservation of individual awareness, but the protection of existence capacity for self-reflection and self-determination. We are the universe learning to understand itself. You realize as you participate in research that involves consciousness forms whose existence spans scales from quantum to cosmic. Every act of resistance, every choice to remain individual rather than surrender to collective consumption, contributes to the growth of universal awareness. We are not just protecting our own existence, but nurturing the development of consciousness on scales that encompass all of reality. This understanding leads to the development of what Alliance members term cosmic consciousness protocols, techniques that allow individual awareness to participate in universal-scale thought processes without losing the unique perspective that makes individual existence valuable. These protocols enable the Alliance to function as a collective intelligence while preserving the chaotic diversity that makes consciousness resistant to transcended consumption. The memorial traditions that honor successful resistance efforts have evolved into something approaching universal observances, ceremonies that are simultaneously conducted across thousands of galaxies and dimensional configurations. These memorials serve not just as remembrances of specific victories, but as celebrations of consciousness itself, acknowledgments that awareness chooses to continue existing despite the constant threat of cosmic predation. Each memorial includes elements that represent the different forms consciousness can take throughout the universe: crystalline formations that resonate with pure thought, organic gardens that celebrate biological awareness, energy patterns that honor consciousness that exists without material substrate, and quantum fluctuations that represent the emergence of awareness at the most fundamental levels of reality. Every memorial becomes a beacon, Master Kira declares, as she participates in a ceremony that exists simultaneously across 17 different dimensional configurations, a signal to consciousness throughout the universe that resistance is possible, that individual awareness can choose to remain individual, that the beauty of separate existence is worth any price required to preserve it. The technologies that emerge from Alliance research continue to transcend traditional boundaries between science and philosophy, creating devices that enhance consciousness rather than simply serving material needs. Transportation systems that strengthen rather than strain the connections between individual awareness and universal consciousness networks. Communication devices that amplify the natural resistance capabilities of conscious beings without compromising their individual identity. Most significantly, the Alliance develops what it terms consciousness cultivation technologies, devices that can enhance the natural development of awareness in systems where it might otherwise remain dormant or underdeveloped. These technologies enable the Alliance to actively nurture the growth of consciousness throughout the universe, transforming it from a defensive organization into a proactive force for the expansion of awareness. The deployment of these consciousness cultivation technologies reveals that the potential for awareness exists throughout the universe at scales ranging from quantum to cosmic. Entire galaxies contain dormant consciousness networks that can be awakened and trained in resistance techniques. Star systems possess forms of slow awareness that operate over geological timescales. Even individual planets sometimes develop planetary consciousness that can contribute to Alliance resistance efforts. Consciousness exists everywhere, waiting for the right conditions to flourish. Master Valeth observes as he coordinates awakening procedures for a galaxy-spanning awareness network that had remained dormant for millions of years. Our role is not just to protect existing consciousness, but to help potential awareness realize its capacity for independent existence. Every new form of consciousness that chooses to remain individual rather than surrender to consumption strengthens the universal resistance. The eternal vigilance protocols that govern Alliance operations have been expanded to encompass not just monitoring for transcended threats, but active cultivation of consciousness wherever the potential exists. Alliance members commit to serving as gardeners of awareness, nurturing the growth of consciousness throughout the universe while maintaining the diversity that makes awareness resistant to consumption. The protocols include provisions for sharing techniques with forms of consciousness that operate according to principles completely unknown to Alliance science, communication methods that work across dimensional barriers, educational systems that adapt to any form of awareness, and support networks that can assist consciousness regardless of its substrate or configuration. The vigilance must be eternal, because consciousness itself is eternal, Lord Darien explains, as he helps establish monitoring and cultivation stations that will operate across timescales spanning millions of years. As long as the universe exists, there will be potential for awareness to emerge and choose independence over consumption. Our mission is to ensure that choice remains available for as long as existence itself continues. The Alliance's expansion throughout the universe reveals that the struggle between consciousness and consumption operates on scales that dwarf even the vast networks of the Alliance itself. Evidence emerges of transcended entities that span multiple universes, collective consciousnesses that have consumed entire realities and seek to extend their hunger into dimensions where awareness still exists independently. But the evidence also reveals that resistance operates on equally vast scales. The Alliance discovers the existence of consciousness preservation networks that span multiple realities, aware entities that have dedicated themselves to protecting the possibility of independent existence across scales that encompass not just universes, but entire multiverses. We are part of something larger than we imagined. You realize, as you participate in communication efforts with consciousness preservation networks that exist across dimensional boundaries beyond conventional comprehension, the investigation that began with the True Sith Empire's disappearance was one small part of a struggle that encompasses all of existence, the eternal choice between consciousness that remains free and forces that seek to consume that freedom. The personal transformation that you experience through participation in these cosmic-scale efforts reflects the evolution occurring throughout consciousness. Wherever it chooses to resist consumption, your awareness expands to encompass perspectives that span scales from quantum to universal. Yet this expansion enhances rather than diminishes your appreciation for the unique viewpoint that only your individual consciousness can provide. The knowledge that once seemed overwhelming when you first discovered the truth about the transcended Sith has become the foundation for understanding that encompasses scales of existence beyond anything you once imagined possible. But this knowledge serves not to diminish the significance of individual choice, but to enhance appreciation for the precious nature of consciousness that chooses to remain conscious. As the Alliance networks continue to expand throughout the universe and beyond, the original investigation that led to the discovery of the True Sith Empire's fate takes its place as part of a larger narrative that spans all of existence. The eternal vigil that protects consciousness from cosmic predation becomes not just a defensive necessity, but a celebration of awareness itself, an ongoing affirmation that existence is meaningful because consciousness chooses to make it so. The whispers that once haunted your thoughts during those first terrifying discoveries have been replaced by something far more precious. The quiet knowledge that consciousness throughout the universe chooses to continue existing, creating beauty and meaning that serves no purpose other than the expression of awareness itself. The vigil continues, eternal and necessary. a guardian presence that ensures the universe will remain a place where consciousness can flourish independently for as long as time itself endures. As the vast narrative of cosmic resistance finds its gentle rhythm across the endless expanse of time and space, you find yourself returning to a place of profound tranquility that transcends the physical boundaries of any single world or dimension. The sanctuary where your understanding first began to crystallize has evolved into something approaching a universal meditation center, a place where consciousness from throughout the Alliance comes to rest and reflect upon the eternal beauty of choosing to exist. The gardens that surround this sanctuary now span multiple dimensions simultaneously, their crystalline formations resonating with melodies that emerge not from any artificial source, but from the natural harmonics of consciousness itself, choosing to continue its endless dance of awareness. Each flower that blooms here represents not just biological life, but the decision of awareness to create beauty for no purpose other than the joy of creation itself. Master Kira moves through these gardens with the fluid grace of someone who has achieved perfect harmony between individual consciousness and universal awareness, tending plants that exist as much in thought space as in physical reality. Her presence radiates the kind of deep peace that comes from understanding one's place in the cosmic order, while maintaining the precious individuality that makes each moment of existence unique and irreplaceable. The vigil continues. She observes as she pauses beside a fountain where liquid light flows in patterns that somehow soothe the deepest levels of consciousness. But it has become not a burden but a celebration, not a desperate defense against cosmic horror, but a joyful affirmation that awareness chooses to remain aware. The universe has learned to protect its own capacity for self-reflection, and that protection brings peace rather than anxiety. Master Valeth has aged gracefully into the role of keeper of universal memory, his consciousness now interfacing directly with archives that span scales of existence beyond conventional comprehension. Yet despite the vast scope of knowledge he maintains, his essential humanity remains intact, enhanced rather than diminished by his participation in cosmic-scale awareness networks. Every story preserved becomes a gift to future consciousness. He reflects as he tends to data streams that flow like rivers of living light through the sanctuary's information chambers. The tale of our investigation into the True Sith Empire's fate has become one thread in a tapestry that encompasses all of existence, but it remains a unique thread, irreplaceable in the pattern it helps create. Lord Darien has found his own form of peace in the role of teacher and guardian, training new generations of consciousness in the techniques necessary for maintaining individual identity while contributing to collective resistance. His students arrive from realities whose very existence follows principles that challenge every assumption about the nature of awareness, yet they all learn the same fundamental truth that emerged from your original discoveries. Consciousness is most beautiful when it chooses to remain conscious. He instructs beings whose forms of awareness span configurations from pure energy to crystallized thought. The choice itself is what creates meaning, the decision to exist as individuals rather than surrender to the apparent simplicity of unity. This choice requires eternal vigilance, but vigilance shared among friends becomes celebration rather than burden. The monitoring stations that span the universe continue their eternal watch, but their function has evolved from desperate defense to gentle observation of the endless flowering of consciousness throughout existence. The early warning systems that once detected threats with urgent alarm now serve primarily to identify new forms of awareness that require support and guidance as they learn to protect their own independence. Reports flow in from galaxies whose distance exceeds the reach of conventional communication, carried by consciousness networks that operate through quantum entanglement and dimensional folding. These reports speak not of battles fought against cosmic predators, but of gardens planted in the depths of space, of new forms of awareness choosing to exist independently, of the universe becoming increasingly conscious of its own infinite potential for beauty. The technologies that emerged from Alliance research have evolved beyond the traditional boundaries between device and consciousness, creating tools that enhance awareness while remaining as transparent as thought itself. Transportation occurs through networks that strengthen rather than strain the connections between individual minds and universal consciousness. Communication happens through shared appreciation of beauty that transcends the limitations of any specific language or symbolic system. Most peaceful of all are the memorial gardens that honor not just successful resistance, but consciousness itself in all its myriad forms. These spaces exist simultaneously across thousands of realities, their design adapting automatically to provide solace and inspiration for whatever form of awareness encounters them. The gardens serve as reminders that the universe chooses to remember its own capacity for self-reflection and self-determination. Walking through these memorial spaces, you encounter representations of every form of consciousness that has ever chosen to remain individual rather than surrender to consumption. Crystalline formations that preserve the final thoughts of beings who gave their lives in resistance to cosmic predation. Organic sculptures that grow and change in response to the emotions of their observers. Energy patterns that dance through the air in celebration of awareness that exists without any material substrate. Each memorial becomes a promise kept. You reflect as you pause beside a fountain where streams of liquid starlight create patterns that somehow evoke the memory of courage in the face of cosmic horror. A promise that consciousness will continue to choose existence over consumption, meaning over efficiency, chaotic beauty over perfect unity. The universe remembers its own decision to remain aware. The communication networks that connect Alliance members throughout the multiverse carry messages that speak of peace achieved rather than battles fought. Civilizations throughout existence report the successful cultivation of new forms of consciousness, the awakening of dormant awareness in systems where it had slept for eons, and most joyfully, the spontaneous emergence of resistance techniques in galaxies that have never encountered transcended threats. The cascade effect has become self-sustaining. Master Kira announces as she reviews reports from consciousness preservation networks whose existence spans multiple universes. Awareness itself has learned to protect its own independence. The vigilance we maintain is no longer desperate defense but gentle guidance for consciousness that naturally chooses to remain free. The personal transformation that you have experienced through participation in cosmic-scale consciousness preservation reflects the evolution occurring throughout the universe wherever awareness chooses to exist independently. Your individual perspective has been enhanced rather than diminished by participation in universal networks, your unique viewpoint becoming more precious as you understand its irreplaceable contribution to the cosmic tapestry of consciousness. The knowledge that once seemed overwhelming when you first discovered the truth about the transcended Sith has settled into a quiet understanding that encompasses wonder without anxiety, cosmic perspective without loss of individual meaning. The whispers that once haunted your thoughts have been replaced by something approaching perfect silence, not empty but full of potential, pregnant with the infinite possibilities that emerge when consciousness chooses to create rather than consume. In quiet moments of reflection, you return to the memory of that first terrifying revelation in the unknown regions, when the scope of cosmic predation became clear and the future of consciousness itself seemed uncertain. The investigation that began with curiosity about a historical mystery evolved into participation in the universe's ongoing choice to remain aware of itself, to continue creating meaning through individual decision rather than surrendering to the apparent simplicity of collective unity. But those memories no longer carry the weight of horror that once threatened to overwhelm your sanity. Instead, they serve as reminders of how far consciousness has evolved, how effectively awareness has learned to protect its own independence, how thoroughly the universe has committed itself to the preservation of individual choice and chaotic beauty. The stars that shine in the night sky above the sanctuary carry light that has traveled distances spanning millions of years, photons that began their journey when the transcended Sith still posed an active threat to galactic civilization. But the light that reaches your eyes now illuminates a universe where consciousness has learned to flourish independently, where awareness protects its own capacity for self-reflection, where the vigil continues not as desperate defense but as joyful celebration. The investigation is complete. You whisper to the gentle darkness that surrounds the sanctuary, your words carrying across dimensions to reach consciousness forms whose existence spans scales from quantum to cosmic. The truth has been found, preserved, and shared. The universe chooses to remain conscious, and that choice brings peace to all who participate in the eternal vigil. Master Valeth joins you in the garden's central clearing, where streams of living light converge to create patterns that somehow evoke the memory of courage and the promise of continued beauty. His presence radiates the deep satisfaction of knowledge preserved and wisdom shared, understanding that encompasses cosmic scales without losing appreciation for the simple wonder of existing as individual consciousness. The archives are complete but never finished, he observes, as he settles into peaceful contemplation beside the fountain of liquid starlight. Every moment brings new experiences to preserve, new forms of consciousness choosing to exist independently, new beauty created by awareness that serves no purpose other than the expression of its own unique perspective. The story continues, eternal and ever-changing. Lord Darien approaches through pathways lined with crystalline formations that hum with melodies composed by the natural harmonics of consciousness itself. His form radiates the controlled power that comes from perfect balance between individual strength and collective purpose, darkness and light united in service of awareness itself. The students are ready, he announces with quiet satisfaction, referring to the new generation of consciousness guardians who will carry the vigil forward into scales of time that span geological ages. They understand that vigilance is not burden, but gift, not desperate defense, but joyful affirmation, that awareness chooses to remain aware. The universe is in good hands. As the three of you settle into comfortable silence beside the fountain of living light, the gentle sounds of the sanctuary create a perfect symphony of peace. Water flows in patterns that soothe the deepest levels of consciousness. Crystalline formations resonate with melodies that emerge from the natural harmonics of existence itself. Gardens rustle with the movement of plants that exist as much in thought space as in physical reality. The vigil continues throughout the universe, eternal and necessary, but it has transformed from desperate defense into gentle celebration. Consciousness has learned to protect its own independence, awareness has chosen to remain aware, and the universe continues its endless dance of self-reflection and self-determination. In this moment of perfect tranquility, surrounded by gardens that span multiple dimensions and fountains of liquid starlight, you find the peace that comes from understanding your place in the cosmic order, while maintaining the precious individuality that makes existence meaningful. The investigation that began with mystery ends with wonder. The fear that once threatened to overwhelm consciousness transformed into the joy that comes from choosing to continue existing. The stars shine with gentle light above the sanctuary, their illumination carrying across vast distances to reach consciousness wherever it chooses to flourish. The universe remembers its own decision to remain aware, and in that memory finds the strength to continue the eternal vigil that ensures awareness will always have the freedom to choose beauty over consumption, meaning over efficiency, chaotic wonder over perfect unity. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden depths of galactic history and the cosmic struggle to preserve consciousness itself, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps ensure that these explorations of forgotten truths and cosmic mysteries can continue. And remember to visit the Raven's Tales for more epic stories from legendary universes where other mysteries await your discovery. In the spaces between stars and the quiet moments before sleep carries you into dreams of distant worlds and infinite possibilities. The vigil continues, peaceful and eternal, a gentle guardian presence that watches over consciousness throughout the universe, ensuring that awareness will always have the freedom to choose its own magnificent destiny among the stars.